Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back in time, not just a few decades, but almost 1,000 years. We're joining one of the most famous, most mysterious, and ultimately, most tragic organizations in history, the Knights Templar. And by joining, I mean you're either one taking the vows. A little heads up, the career path has fantastic benefits, like papal blessings and prime real estate in the Holy Land. But the retirement plan is, let's just say, it's a bit fiery. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how we're all connected in this quiet, late night space. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in the chapel is thick and cold, heavy with the scent of old stone, melting beeswax, and a faint whisper of incense. It clings to the back of your throat. This isn't a grand cathedral. It's a small, private Templar preceptor, probably somewhere in the French countryside. The only light comes from a few flickering torches, held in iron sconces, casting long dancing shadows that make the faces of the men standing before you seem like shifting masks carved from granite. They are all dressed in the same simple robes, their expressions unreadable, their silence absolute. You are kneeling on the hard, uneven stone floor. Your knees ache, but you barely notice. Your heart is a drum against your ribs. Before you stands the master of the ceremony, an older knight whose face is a roadmap of scars from battles you can only imagine. In his hands he holds a heavy, leather-bound book of the Gospels. This is it, the culmination of months, maybe even years of waiting, of proving your worth, of selling your lands and severing your ties to the life you once knew. He begins to speak, his voice a low rumble that fills the small space. He doesn't ask if you're ready. He tells you what you are about to become. You are to surrender your will, your possessions, and your very body to the service of God and the defense of the Holy Land. He outlines the 3 great vows. First, the vow of poverty. You reach into the simple purse at your belt and empty its contents onto a plate. It's not much, just a few coins, the last remnants of your old life. From this moment on, you will own nothing. Not the horse you ride, not the armor that protects you, not even the coarse wool of the tunic on your back. Everything belongs to the order. Next, the vow of chastity. You must renounce all worldly pleasures, all companionship with women. Your life is to be one of monastic discipline. The order will be your bride, your family, your entire world. And finally, the most difficult of all, the vow of obedience. You must obey the master of the order without question, even if he commands you to walk into a battle you know you cannot win. Your life is no longer your own to preserve. It is a tool for the order to use as it sees fit. You place your hands on the Gospels. The leather is cool and worn smooth by the hands of countless others who have knelt in this exact spot. You repeat the words of the oath, your voice sounding thin and unfamiliar in the charged silence. With each word, you feel a chain to your past breaking. Your family name, your inheritance, the woman you might have married, they all recede, becoming ghosts in a life that is no longer yours. Then comes a rather peculiar and less famous part of the rules you're now bound by. You're told you cannot even kiss your own mother or sister goodbye. The order is your family now, your only family. Furthermore, you're forbidden from many of the frivolous pursuits of the nobility you just left behind. No more hunting for sport with the strange exception of lions, which you're told you are permitted to hunt, though the chances of finding one in the French countryside seem slim. You must also avoid fashionable clothing, especially pointed shoes, which were seen as a sign of vanity. It's a complete stripping away of personal identity. The master takes a white mantle from a nearby chest. It's made of simple, heavy wool, and sewn over the heart is a stark red cross. He drapes it over your shoulders. The weight is surprising, a physical burden that represents the spiritual one you've just accepted. This is the uniform of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The white represents the purity of your new life. The red cross, your readiness to become a martyr for the faith. As you stand stiffly, one of the knights, you don't know who, clasps your shoulder in a firm, brief gesture of acceptance. There is no applause, no celebration. There is only a quiet, solemn understanding. You have been accepted. You are one of them. Historians still debate just how secret these initiation rites truly were in the early days. Some argue the secrecy was exaggerated later by their enemies to make them seem sinister, while others believe a core of esoteric knowledge was present from the very start. The truth is, we don't have a perfectly preserved script of that first ceremony. Much of what we know was pieced together from later testimonies, some of which were given under extreme duress. What is certain is that for you, in this moment, the world has shrunk to the size of this chapel, to the symbol on your chest, and to the singular purpose now burned into your soul. Your old life is over. Your new one as a warrior monk has just begun, and your first destination is already set the east. You are going to the Holy Land, to the very place where this whole incredible, dangerous, and ultimately doomed story first began. The journey to the east is not a romantic voyage. There is no gentle sea breeze or time for quiet contemplation. You are packed onto a cramped, swaying ship that smells of unwashed bodies, seas inscus, and livestock. For weeks, the world is a nauseating rhythm of creaking wood and crashing waves. But then, one morning, a cry goes up. Land, you stumble onto the deck, squinting against a sun that feels hotter and whiter than any you've ever known. The Holy Land. It doesn't look holy. It looks dusty, barren, and intimidating. The port city of Acre is a chaotic swirl of strange languages, unfamiliar faces, and a tension in the air so thick you can almost taste it. This is the frontier. From Acre, you travel with a heavily armed convoy to Jerusalem. The road is little more than a dirt track winding through rocky hills, and you begin to understand the fear that drove the Order's creation. Every blind corner, every shadowy ravine feels like a potential ambush. You are no longer in the familiar, rolling hills of France. You are in a land that feels ancient, contested, and deeply dangerous. Finally you arrive. Jerusalem. You are led through the city's bustling streets to the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa compound. This is the heart of your new world, the international headquarters of the Knights Templar. An older knight is faced into leather by the eastern sun, takes it upon himself to give you your first history lesson. He leads you to a courtyard overlooking the city. Forget the grand chapels and wealthy preceptories you saw in Europe, he says, his voice raspy. That is not how it began. You must understand our poverty to understand our purpose. He tells you the story. It begins just a couple of decades after the First Crusade, around the year 1120. While the Crusaders had successfully captured Jerusalem, the roads leading to it were still a death trap for the thousands of unarmed pilgrims who flocked to the city. Robbery and murder were commonplace. A French nobleman from Champagne, a knight named Hugues de Payens, saw this suffering and decided he had to do something. He gathered a small group around him, just 8 other knights in total. Dying men. That was it. 9 knights to protect the entire kingdom. The old soldier says with a dry chuckle. It was madness. They were so poor, so utterly lacking in resources that legend says 2 knights had to share a single horse. He points to the wall, where a carving of the Order's seal is etched into the stone to weary-looking knights, crammed together on the back of one steed. That is our sigil, not a roaring lion or a soaring eagle. 2 poor fellows on a single horse. Never forget it. These 9 knights presented themselves to the King of Jerusalem, Baldwin II. They had no great plan, just a simple, desperate proposal. They would dedicate themselves to protecting the pilgrim roads. They asked for nothing in return but his blessing. The king, however, saw the potential in their devotion. He granted them a headquarters, a place to live and stable their horses. He gave them a wing of the royal palace, the very building you are standing in now, situated on the sacred ground of the Temple Mount, believed for centuries to be the site of the original Temple of Solomon. And from that the temple came your name, the Templars. But here the old knight lowers his voice, even though you are seemingly alone. The official records, the stories we tell the world are clear. We were founded to protect pilgrims, but historians and even some of our own brothers have always debated the exact year. It all began, some say 1118, others 1119, a few say 1120. The records of those early days are incomplete. And there's a deeper question that has always been whispered, a controversy that dogs us to this day. He leans a little closer. Why would a king give 9 poor knights, with no formal backing, a piece of the most valuable and sacred real estate in the entire Christian world? Some say he must have had another, more secret task for them. That protecting the roads was just a cover story. A cover for what? Well, who knows what secrets and relics might lie buried deep beneath our feet. Right here, under the ruins of Solomon's temple. He straightens up the moment of conspiracy passing. For nearly a decade, he explains those 9 nights labored in relative obscurity. It wasn't until Hugues de Payens traveled back to Europe that their fortunes changed. He sought the help of the most influential churchman of the era, Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard was captivated by the idea of an order of men who were both monks and warriors, a new kind of knighthood. He wrote a powerful treatise called In Praise of the New Knighthood, which was essentially a fantastic piece of public relations. He championed their cause at the Council of Troyes in 1129, and there the Pope officially recognized you. The poor fellow soldiers of Christendom of the Temple of Solomon were formally sanctioned by the Church. Donations, land, and recruits began to pour in from every corner of Christendom. The 9 poor knights became the seed of a global enterprise. You look out from the courtyard, over the ancient city, the sun beating down on its pale stones. The story feels both impossibly grand and strangely intimate. You are standing at the epicenter of it all. The humble beginnings, the whispered secrets, the papal blessings, it all happened right here. Your training is over. Now your life as a Templar truly begins, a life of harsh discipline and unwavering faith, a life that demands you be 2 things at once. The bell tolls for matins, the first prayer of the day, long before the sun is even considered rising. It's a jarring, insistent sound that slices through your sleep. You stumble out of your cot in the communal dormitory, a long Spartan hall where knights sleep fully clothed, ready for a call to arms at a moment's notice. There are no private chambers here, no personal comforts. Your bed is a simple straw mattress, your blanket coarse wool. A single lamp is kept burning all night, not for comfort, but for security. It's a life stripped down to its bare essentials. You shuffle with your brothers down to the chapel, your footsteps echoing in the pre-dawn chill. The prayers are recited in a low, rhythmic Latin chant. Your mind is still thick with sleep, but the routine is already becoming second nature. This is how every day begins, and it's a stark reminder of the first half of your identity. You are a monk. Your life is governed by a strict set of rules, the Latin rule adapted from the Cistercian order by Bernard of Clairvaux himself. It dictates every hour of your day. After prayers, there is no lingering. You head to the stables. This is where the other half of your identity comes to life. You are a soldier. Each knight is responsible for the care of his own horses. You're not just given 1 horse, but a string of them, typically 3 or 4. There's the powerful destrier, your war horse, a magnificent and expensive beast bred for the shock of a cavalry charge. There's a lighter palfrey for travel and a pack horse for your gear. You and a squire, a young man aspiring to join the order, spend the next hour grooming, feeding, and checking the animals for any signs of injury. The horses are the engines of your warfare. Their health is paramount. Breakfast, when it finally comes, is a silent, functional affair in the refectory. You sit on long wooden benches, and as you eat your meager meal, usually some bread and a thin porridge or soup, one of the brothers reads aloud from the scriptures. Talking is forbidden. The only communication allowed is a simple system of hand signs for requesting more bread or water. This enforced silence is meant to encourage contemplation, but it also creates a unique, intense atmosphere of shared purpose without the need for words. The rest of the morning is dedicated to training. You spend hours in the practice yard under the relentless sun, sweat soaking through your tunic. You drill with the sword, the lance, the mace. You practice formations, charging in tight unison with your brothers, learning to move as one single, unstoppable entity. The Templar charge was legendary, a terrifying spectacle of disciplined violence. To be a part of it requires endless repetition, until the movements are instinctual, until your will is completely sublimated to the will of your commander. Lunch is the main meal of the day, and it's slightly more substantial. You might get meat, but the rule is specific. It can only be served 3 times a week. The thinking was that a diet too rich in meat would inflame carnal desires, something to be avoided at all costs. You eat what given, sharing a bowl with the knight next to you. This practice, like the two knights on a horse, was another symbol of fraternity and humility. The afternoons are a mix of duties. You might be assigned to guard a section of the city walls, your eyes constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of threat. Or perhaps you'll be tasked with smithing, repairing armor, and showing horses. Every Templar was expected to have practical skills beyond fighting. You are part of a self-sufficient machine. There's no room for idle hands. The rule forbids it, and the rule forbids so many other things, small things you never would have thought of. You are not allowed to have locks on your personal chests, a measure to enforce the vow of poverty and ensure there are no private possessions. You cannot receive letters from home without the master's permission, and they must be read aloud in his presence. You are forbidden from hawking and hunting for sport, a favorite pastime of the nobility you left behind. The only exception, as you were told, was the lion, a rule that still seems bizarrely specific here in the Holy Land. Historians have long debated the origin of this particular rule. Was it a symbolic allowance representing the fight against a great evil? Or was it a practical matter, as lions were a genuine threat in the region at the time? The true reason is lost to the specific context of the 12th century. As evening approaches, you gather again for Vespers, the sunset prayer. The day is bookended by devotion. Dinner is a light meal, often using the leftovers from lunch. Then, after the final prayer of compline, you are dismissed to the dormitory. Silence is imposed. You lie on your cot, exhausted, every muscle aching. The day has been a relentless cycle of prayer, chores, and combat training. There is no privacy, no leisure, no personal freedom. It's a life of extreme discipline and deprivation. But as you lie there in the dark, listening to the soft breathing of your brothers around you, you also feel something else. You feel a sense of clarity. Your world, which was once filled with countless choices and ambitions, has been reduced to one singular mission. You are here to serve God and protect the innocent. Historians continue to argue whether the average Templar was more of a monk who fought or a soldier who prayed. Looking at your blistered hands and your aching knees, you realize the answer is simple. You have to be both completely and without reservation every single day. There is no separating the two. They are forged together in the crucible of this harsh, dedicated life. A few months into your new life, you are given a task that has nothing to do with a sword or a prayer book. The master in Jerusalem summons you. An estate you held back in Normandy, which you had bequeathed to the order upon your entry, has finally been sold. The proceeds need to be transferred to the Holy Land to fund the war effort. In your old life, this would have been a logistical nightmare. You'd have to hire armed guards, load heavy chests of silver coins onto a cart, and pray you didn't get ambushed on the road from the coast. The journey would take months and be fraught with peril. But you're a Templar now, and the Templars have a better way. The master hands you not a bag of coins, but a small, folded piece of parchment. It's sealed with wax, but what's inside is what matters. It's a letter written in a complex cipher detailing the transaction. Your task is simply to ride as a messenger to the Templar Preceptor Y in the port city of Tyre. This seemingly simple task introduces you to the other great pillar of the Order's power, the one that had nothing to do with fighting and everything to do with finance. You are witnessing the birth of something that will change the world: international banking. The problem the Templars solved was simple. Pilgrims and crusaders heading to the Holy Land needed money, but carrying it was suicidal. A nobleman might sell his entire estate to fund his crusade, only to be robbed and left destitute in the mountains of Anatolia. The Templars, with their network of fortified preceptories stretching from London to Jerusalem, were perfectly positioned to solve this. They had secure locations in every major European kingdom and throughout the Crusader states. So they developed a system. A pilgrim in Paris could walk into the Paris Temple massive, fortified compound and deposit his fortune. In return, he would receive a letter of credit, a piece of parchment with a coded message detailing the amount. He could then travel to the Holy Land with nothing but the clothes on his back and that small, unassuming letter. Upon arrival in Jerusalem, he would present the letter to the Templars there. The Templars would verify the code, and a corresponding amount of cash would be given to him in the local currency. It was revolutionary. It was secure, efficient, And for the pilgrim, it felt like a miracle. For the Templars, it was just good logistics, but it quickly evolved into something much bigger. They weren't just transferring funds, they were becoming the de facto bankers for all of Christendom. Kings and popes used them to move vast sums of money. Nobles on crusade would leave their entire estates and fortunes under Templar management for years at a time. They became the trusted guardians of Europe's wealth. As you ride towards Tyre, you reflect on the ingenuity of it all. The ciphers used on the letters were a closely guarded secret, unique to the order and changed frequently. Forging one would be nearly impossible, but there's a detail that isn't widely advertised, a clever bit of financial maneuvering that allows the order to profit from this service. The church, as you well know, strictly forbids usury the lending of money at interest. It's considered a sin. So, how does the order make money? This is where the Templars showed a genius for finding loopholes. They wouldn't charge interest. Instead, they might charge a management fee for holding the assets. Or they would play the currency, exchange rates. A noble might deposit French livres in Paris, and the Templars would pay him out in Jerusalem and Venetian ducats, or Byzantine byzants, with the exchange rate conveniently calculated to leave a tidy profit for the order. Sometimes they would structure a loan as a land deal, where they would buy a piece of land with the agreement to sell it back at a higher price later, the difference being, in effect, interest. It was a financial gray area, and the Templars were masters of navigating it. Historians have been arguing for centuries about the precise nature of this system. Was it a deliberate, centralized plan to create a financial empire from the very beginning? Or did it grow organically, a collection of local practices that gradually coalesced into a coherent system out of sheer necessity? The records are ambiguous enough to support both views. Some see the Templars as shrewd, proto-capitalists who saw a market opportunity, while others view them as practical military men who simply stumbled upon a solution to a logistical headache, only to find it becoming unexpectedly lucrative. You reach the preceptor Y and Tyron present your coded letter. The knight in charge, the treasurer, breaks the seal and studies the strange symbols. He cross-references it with a ledger, a thick book filled with similar coded entries. He nods, satisfied. No money changes hands. The transaction is simply recorded. The funds from Normandy are now officially logged in the Holy Land's accounts, ready to be used to buy grain, timber for siege engines, or fresh war horses. The physical silver might not even move for years. It might be used to fund the order's activities in France. The actual coins don't matter. What matters is the entry in the ledger. It's an economy built on trust, security, and information. On your ride back to Jerusalem, you see the order in a new light. You join to fight for God, but you're part of something far more complex. The Templars are not just an army. They are a vast, multinational corporation with a military wing. Their power isn't just in their castles and their lances. It's in their vaults and their ledgers. They are protecting pilgrim souls, yes, but they are also protecting their savings. This immense wealth, this intricate web of financial obligation, makes the order indispensable. Kings rely on you. The Pope relies on you. But as you look up at the stone walls of your Jerusalem headquarters, a flicker of unease passes through you. To be a creditor to kings is to have great power, but it is also a very dangerous position to be in. For all the talk of prayers and ledgers, the time inevitably comes when you must be what you were trained to be a weapon. The alarm comes in the middle of a sweltering afternoon. A large Saracen raiding party has been spotted, threatening a nearby pilgrim caravan. There is no debate. No discussion. The master gives the order, and you move. You head not to the chapel, but to the armory. The process is a familiar ritual, a transformation from monk to war machine. First, the patide, Ketion, a thick gamby sun that will absorb the brutal impact of blows. Then, the hauberk of chain mail, a heavy shirt of interlocking iron rings that flows over you like a cold metal river. Greaves for your legs, gauntlets for your hands, and finally the helmet. It's a flat-topped great helm offering immense protection but reducing your vision to a narrow slit. The world becomes a thin, focused line. Last to go on is the mantle. You take the heavy white cloak and drape it over your shoulders. It's a simple garment, but it changes everything. Until now, you have been an anonymous man in a suit of iron. Now, you are a Templar. The stark red cross over your heart is a declaration. It's a target. You suddenly understand its dual meaning with perfect clarity. The white represents the purity you've sworn to uphold, but on the battlefield it makes you incredibly conspicuous. The red represents your willingness to shed your blood for Christ, making you a martyr in waiting. There is no camouflage, no blending in. To wear the mantle is to announce your presence, to draw the enemy's eye, to invite combat. As you mount your destrier in the courtyard, you see the full force of the order assembled. It's a sea of white and red, but you also notice for the first time the clear distinction. Only the knights, the noble-born warriors, wear the white mantles. The sergeants, the lower-born professional soldiers who are the backbone of the order, wear black or brown robes with the red cross. They are just as disciplined, just as brave, but the color of their cloaks signifies a different station. It's a visual hierarchy on the battlefield, and that red cross itself, you've learned, was not part of the original uniform. For the first couple of decades, the Templars fought in whatever armor they had, marked only by their shared poverty and discipline. It was Pope Eugenius II, a Cistercian himself and a great admirer of Bernard of Clairvaux, who granted the Templars the right to wear the blood-red cross. Historians place this grant around 1147, just in time for the Second Crusade, but the exact circumstances of the decree are a topic of academic discussion. Was it a reward for their growing reputation, or a deliberate marketing tool to distinguish them from other crusading orders and attract new recruits and donations? Either way, it was a stroke of branding genius. It gave you an unmistakable identity. You ride out in a tight column, dust kicking up from the horse's hooves. The sun is merciless. Inside your helmet, you are breathing your own hot air. The silence is absolute, save for the creak of leather and the jangle of mail. This is Templar discipline in its purest form. While other Crusader armies were often a chaotic mix of feudal lords, all vying for glory, the Templars fought as a single unit. No one charges without an order. To do so is one of the gravest sins a Templar can commit, punishable by being stripped of your mantle and cast out of the order. You see the enemy on a wide, dusty plain. They outnumber you perhaps 3 to 1. They are mostly like cavalry, fast and agile. Your force is a small, heavy fist. You form up a solid line of iron and faith. And you wait. This is the hardest part. The enemy horsemen will sometimes ride close, taunting you, firing arrows that clang uselessly against your heavy armor. The temptation to give chase, to charge, is immense. But you hold. You trust your commander. You trust the brother next to you. Then, the signal. It's not a horn or a shout. It's a banner, the bowsant. It's the sacred battle standard of the order, a simple flag, half black and half white. Its name is said to mean beautiful and noble, but its meaning on the field is stark white for the fairness you show to your friends, black for the fierce visage you present to your foes. When the bowsant is raised, you know the moment is come. The master gives the command. Your squire hands you your lance. You couch it under your arm, a long spear of ashen iron. The line moves forward, first at a walk, then a trot, then a thunderous, earth-shaking gallop. This is the famed Templar charge. You are no longer individual knights. You are a single spearhead, a wedge of unstoppable force. The sound of hundreds of heavy war horses charging in perfect unison is a terrifying wall of sound. You lean forward, one with your horse, your entire world focused on the point of your lance and the enemy line that is rushing towards you. You see the fear in their eyes in the split second before impact. The lighter horses cannot stand against the massed weight of your charge. The line breaks. The disciplined force of your attack shatters their formation. The battle dissolves into a swirling melee, but the decisive blow has been struck. Your sword is now in your hand, and you fight with the cold, efficient training that has been drilled into you day after day. Later, as you ride back, weary and blood-spattered, the weight of your mantle is stained and soiled, but the red cross seems to burn even brighter. You did not die today. You were not a martyr, but you understand with a certainty that settles deep in your bones that the mantle is a promise. It's a promise you make to your brothers that you will hold the line, and it's a promise to God that you are ready for the day when you won't return. It is the greatest honor and the heaviest burden you will ever know. Years pass. You are no longer the green recruit who knelt in that chilly French chapel. The sun of the east has weathered your face, and your hands are calloused by the sword and the reins. You have seen battle, you have seen death, and you have risen through the ranks of the order. You are now a commander, in charge of a small preceptor Y in the north of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. With this rank comes a deeper understanding of the order's true place in the world, a position of such unique and extraordinary power that it feels almost unreal. One day a tax collector, a representative of the local feudal lord, the Count of Tripoli, arrives at your gate. He is a pompous man, puffed up with his own importance, and he carries a scroll demanding a tithe on your harvest. Your sergeants look to you, ready to send him packing. You, however, meet him with a calm that unnerves him. You listen to his demands. Then you show him a document of your own. It's not a sword or a threat, but a piece of parchment bearing the seal of the Pope himself. The document is a copy of a papal bull, a formal decree issued by the Holy Father. This one is called Om de Optimum, issued by Pope Innocent II way back in 1139. You've had to memorize its key passages. You explain to the stunned tax collector, as if speaking to a child, what it means. It means that the Knights Templar, your order, are a special case. You are exempt from all local laws and taxes. You do not answer to kings, princes, or bishops. You answer to one authority, and one authority alone, the Pope in Rome. The tax collector sputters, disbelieving. His count has authority over everyone in his domain. That's how feudalism works. You patiently explain that it does not apply to the Templars. You are not required to pay any tithe to any church or lord. You are, in effect, a sovereign entity, a state within a state with your own priests, your own chapels, and your own chain of command that goes directly to the very top of Christendom. The man leaves, confused and indignant, but empty-handed. He has no power here. This is the bedrock of your immense power. Om de Optimum and subsequent papal bulls gave the Templars a status that no other institution, secular or religious, could match. It allowed you to build your castles and farms without interference, to move men and materials across borders without paying tolls, and to accumulate wealth without it being taxed away by greedy monarchs. It made you autonomous, untouchable. But with this great privilege comes a great and subtle danger. Kings are, by their nature, jealous of their power. To have an organization within their borders that does not answer to them is a constant source of friction. You see it in the small things, a dispute over land rights with a local baron, a conflict over water access with a neighboring monastery. The local authorities resent your privileges, your wealth, your independence. They see you as arrogant, and perhaps you think some of your brothers are. Power can do that to a man. There's a strange, lesser-known privilege granted by the Pope that demonstrates the sheer extent of your special status. In towns or lands that were under an interdict of papal punishment, where all religious services are forbidden, no masses, no baptisms, no Christian burials, the Templars were exempt. When the local church was locked and silent, the Templar chapel could still hold Mass. Templar priests could still administer the sacraments. In a deeply religious age, this was an incredible power. It made you the sole conduit to God in a spiritually starved land. While this was a powerful tool for influence, it also bred deep resentment among the local clergy, who felt their authority was being undermined. You start to see the bigger picture, the delicate political game the order has to play. You are not just soldiers. You are diplomats and power brokers. The Grand Master in Jerusalem doesn't just plan military campaigns. He negotiates treaties, advises kings, and corresponds directly with the Pope. The order often acted as a stabilizing force in the Crusader states, a neutral arbiter between the squabbling feudal lords of Jerusalem, Tripoli, and Antioch. Their loyalty was not to any one king, but to the concept of Christendom itself, a concept embodied by the Pope. But this very loyalty is a subject of intense debate among modern historians. Was the order's allegiance to the Pope absolute and purely spiritual? Or was it a brilliant political strategy? By pledging allegiance only to the Pope, the Templars effectively freed themselves from the control of every other monarch on earth. It was a declaration of independence, sanctified by the highest possible authority. Some scholars argue that this was the central reason for the order's success, creating a unified international common structure that was immune to petty feudal politics. Others suggest it was this very autonomy that planted the seeds of their destruction, creating an entity so powerful and unaccountable that it was perceived as a threat by the growing power of secular kings. Sitting in your commander's office, reviewing the accounts and the state of your defenses, you feel the weight of this unique position. You command a fortress, a farm, a contingent of elite warriors. You report to your superiors in Acre, who report to the Grand Master. And the Grand Master reports to God's representative on earth. It's a clean, simple, and impossibly arrogant chain of command. You are part of a holy, transnational corporation that operates above the law. For now, this makes you powerful. It makes you essential. But you can't shake the feeling that to be above kings is to make enemies of them. And a king, you know, is an enemy unlike any other. Your duties eventually take you back to Europe. You are now a senior official tasked with managing some of the order's vast estates in France. The Sultan's son of the East has been replaced by the green fields and damp air of your homeland. But France has changed, or perhaps you are just seeing it through different eyes. A new kind of power is consolidating here. Not the fragmented authority of feudal lords, but the centralized, absolute power of a king. And this king is a man you will come to know all too well. His name is Philip IV. They call him Philippe le Bel, Philip the Fair. The nickname isn't about justice or kindness. It refers to his appearance. He is said to be strikingly handsome, with an impassive, almost statue-like demeanor. He rarely shows emotion, speaking little and smiling less. This unnerving calm masks a will of iron and a fervent, almost fanatical belief in the divine right and authority of the French monarchy. In his mind, he is God's chosen instrument on earth, and the kingdom of France is the most sacred of all realms. Any challenge to his authority is not just a political disagreement. It is an act of blasphemy. You first encounter the reality of his reign not through a direct meeting, but by observing the state of his kingdom. Philip is perpetually, desperately, in need of money. He has a vision for France, a modern, centralized state with a professional army and a paid bureaucracy, all loyal directly to the crown. This is a radical departure from the old feudal system, where the king had to rely on the goodwill of his powerful vassals. But this vision is fantastically expensive, and Philip is not a man to be constrained by a budget. So he has spent his entire reign finding creative, and often ruthless, ways to fill his coffers. You hear the stories whispered in the taverns and marketplaces. He had debased the coinage, mixing in cheaper metals while keeping the face value the same, causing rampant inflation that cheated his people. He had expelled the Jews from France in 1306, seizing all their assets and property, a move that brought a temporary windfall to the treasury but crippled the nation's financial systems. Then he turned on the Lombard bankers, Italian merchants who had taken the place of the Jews, arresting them and confiscating their wealth as well. This is Philip's pattern: identify a group with money and a degree of political vulnerability, accuse them of some crime against the state or the faith, and then use the power of the monarchy to strip them of their assets. He is a king who rules like a predator, constantly searching for his next meal. And as you manage the Templar accounts in the Paris Temple, you start to feel a prickle of unease. Because you know, better than almost anyone, where the largest, most tempting pool of wealth in the entire kingdom is located. It's with you. The Paris Temple is not just a church. It's a fortress, the financial heart of the order in Northern Europe. It acts as the unofficial treasury for the French crown. Royal funds are deposited here for safekeeping. You've even granted Philip massive loans to fund his endless wars, particularly his long and costly conflict with England. The King of France is, to put it bluntly, deeply in your debt. There's a strange, almost absurd detail about your relationship with the king. At one point, during a violent tax riot in Paris, Philip's own life was in danger. The Parisian mob was so incensed by his latest currency manipulation that they stormed the royal palace. Where did the king flee for safety? To the Paris Temple. You, the Templars, gave him sanctuary, protecting him from his own enraged subjects. He spent several days living within your walls, seeing with his own eyes the sheer scale of your operation, the smoothness of your administration, the visible signs of your immense wealth. He saw your security, your efficiency, and he was safe. Historians have often wondered what exactly Philip was thinking during those days. Was he grateful, or was he taking inventory like a wolf sheltering in a sheepfold, marveling at the plumpness of the flock? The academic world is still split on Philip's primary motivation. Was his eventual move against the Templars a cold, cynical cash grab, a medieval form of asset seizure driven by his crushing debts? This is the traditional and most popular view. Or was it driven by a genuine, albeit paranoid, belief that the Templars represented a state within a state that threatened his vision of absolute monarchy? This more complex interpretation suggests the motive was power, not just money. Philip couldn't tolerate an organization that operated within his kingdom, but beyond his control. The truth, most likely, is an inseparable combination of the two. He wanted the money, and he wanted to destroy a rival power. The Templars offered him a chance to do both at once. You try to go about your duties overseeing the collection of rents, managing the vast agricultural estates, and ensuring the smooth transfer of funds to the east. But you can't ignore the signs. The king's agents are everywhere, asking questions. His chief minister, a ruthlessly efficient lawyer named Guillaume de Nogaret, has a reputation for dismantling any obstacle to the king's will. And you are, without a doubt, the largest obstacle. You are rich, you are powerful, and you are privileged. In the eyes of a king like Philip the Fair, this doesn't make you a valuable ally. It makes you a target. The air in Paris is growing colder, and you feel a storm gathering, a storm aimed directly at the heart of the temple. In the high silencing chambers of the Paris temple, the mood is tense. The threat of the king is a physical presence, a shadow that looms over every conversation. But King Philip, for all his power and ambition, is still just a king. Your ultimate shield, the foundation upon which your entire order is built, is the Pope. Your immunity, your privileges, your very existence as an independent body, all flow from the Holy See. So while your eyes watch the king's palace on the Isle de la Cite, your thoughts and hopes turn south, towards the man who holds your fate in his hands, Pope Clement V. But here, the comfort of faith meets the cold, hard reality of politics. The Pope is not where he should be. He is not in Rome, the eternal city, the seat of St. Peter, surrounded by the power and history of the Church. The papal court has, for all intents and purposes, moved. It's now situated near Avignon, a city just across the river from French territory. The Pope is now, geographically and politically, in the shadow of the French crown. And the man himself, Pope Clement V, is a Frenchman. Before he wore the papal tiara, he was Bertrand de Got, Archbishop of Bordeaux. His election to the papacy in 1305 was the result of a deadlocked conclave, a power struggle between Italian and French factions. It was Philip the Fair's influence that broke the stalemate and placed his own subject on the papal throne. Clement owes his position in many ways to the very king who now threatens you. It's a debt that Philip fully intends to collect. You try to paint a picture of him in your mind, based on the reports from your brothers who have dealings with the papal court. Clement is not a man of iron or like the great popes of the past. He is a lawyer and a diplomat by nature, a man who seeks compromise and avoids direct confrontation. He is said to be plagued by ill health. Rumors constantly swirl about his stomach ailments and a possible cancer, which often leads to periods of indecision and inaction. He is a cautious, calculating man, caught in a political vice. On one side of the vice is you, the Knights Templar. You are the Pope's men. To dissolve you, to condemn you, would be an unprecedented act. It would be for the Pope to cut off his own arm, to destroy an order that swears allegiance directly to him. It would set a terrifying precedent that a secular king could dictate church policy and destroy a religious order for his own financial and political gain. It would fundamentally weaken the papacy for generations to come. On the other side of the vice is Philip. He is relentless, demanding, and dangerously close. And Clement knows what happens to popes who defy Philip the Fair. He is haunted by the ghost of his predecessor, Pope Boniface VII. Boniface was a proud, authoritarian pope who clashed fiercely with Philip over the king's attempts to tax the French clergy. Their conflict escalated until Philip, through his minister Guillaume de Nogaret, did the unthinkable. His agents stormed the papal residence in an agony, captured the Pope, and subjected him to humiliation and abuse. The aged Boniface was rescued by locals after a few days, but he died within a month, likely from the shock and trauma of the ordeal. But here is a truly chilling detail, a piece of information that demonstrates the kind of man Clement is dealing with. Philip's vindictiveness didn't end with Boniface's death. He is now demanding that Clement begin a posthumous trial of the dead Pope, to have his corpse exhumed and officially condemned as a heretic. This is the pressure Clement is under. It's not just a political disagreement. It's a campaign of absolute dominance by a king who believes he is answerable only to God and wants to make the church his instrument. So when Philip begins to present his case against the Templars, whispering accusations of heresy and depravity, Clement is in an impossible position. He does what any good diplomat would do. He plays for time. He launches his own papal investigation, hoping to take control of the process away from the king. He insists that a religious order can only be judged by the church. He writes letters. He calls for councils. He delays. Historians have debated the character and motives of Clement V for centuries. Was he, as many have portrayed him, a weak and cowardly pope, a puppet dancing on Philip's strings, who ultimately sacrificed the Templars to appease the king and save his own skin? Or was he a tragic figure, a pragmatist who understood the new reality of European politics? Perhaps he saw that the power of secular monarchies was on the rise and the universal authority of the papacy was waning. In this view, he was weak. He was playing a losing hand as best he could, trying to preserve some shred of papal authority from the wreckage of Philip's assault. The truth is likely buried somewhere in the middle, in the heart of a man burdened with a power he was not strong enough to wield against a king who had no scruples. From your position in Paris, all you can do is wait and hope. You trust in the sanctity of the Pope's office. You trust in the 200 years of loyal service your order has given to the Church. The accusations are absurd, you tell yourself. The Pope will see through this. He will protect his own. But every rumor that filters back from Avignon speaks of the king's growing influence and the Pope's faltering resolve. Your shield, once forged in the divine authority of Rome, now seems fragile, and it is held by a trembling hand. As the political storm clouds gather, the face of the order, the man at the very top of your global pyramid, arrives in France. He is Jacques de Molay, the 23rd and final Grand Master of the Knights Templar. His arrival should be a moment of reassurance, a sign that the leadership is taking charge. Instead, it feels like the arrival of a captain on the deck of a ship that is already taking on water. You see him for the first time during a formal assembly at the Paris Temple. He is an old man, well into his 60s, which is a considerable age for the 14th century, especially for a warrior. He has spent the better part of his life in the East, fighting for a cause that now seems lost. He is a veteran of the final, desperate battles for the Holy Land. He was there for the fall of the last Crusader strongholds. The defining experience of his life has been one of retreat and defeat. He is not a symbol of victory. He is a symbol of grim, weary survival. He carries himself with the dignity of his office, but you can see the exhaustion in his eyes. He is a man out of his element and perhaps out of his time. His entire life has been focused on military matters, logistics, fortifications, battlefield strategy. Now, he finds himself in the heart of Europe, caught in a web of political intrigue, facing an enemy who fights not with scimitars and arrows, but with lawyers, rumors, and royal decrees. He is a soldier forced to play the game of a courtier, and he is hopelessly outmatched. Jacques de Molay had been summoned to France by Pope Clement V, officially to discuss plans for a new crusade. This was the great hope, the last-ditch effort to reclaim the Holy Land and, more importantly, to give the military orders, both the Templars and their rivals, the hospitals, a renewed sense of purpose. Molay presents his own plan to the Pope, a grand vision of a massive, coordinated invasion. But it's clear his heart isn't really in it. The era of the Great Crusades is over. The willing Europe is gone. The Pope also raises another issue, the possibility of merging the Templars and the hospitals into a single, more powerful order. This idea had been floating around for years. From a logistical standpoint, it made a certain kind of sense, but Molay is staunchly against it. He defends the Templars' independence with a passion that borders on stubbornness. He argues that competition between the two orders has made them both stronger. He insists on the unique history and traditions of the temple. In retrospect, this was a catastrophic mistake. By refusing to merge, he kept the Templars as a distinct, separate entity, making them a much easier target for Philip to isolate and attack. Had they merged with the Hospitals, who had a much better relationship with the French crown, Philip's plan might have been impossible to execute. There's a curious, almost pathetic detail from this period that reveals Molay's naivety. While he is in Paris, he is asked to be a pallbearer at the funeral of Catherine of Courtenay, the sister-in-law of King Philip. He accepts the honor. There he is, the head of a supposedly secret and sinister organization, walking in a public procession alongside the very man who is plotting his downfall. Did he suspect nothing? Did he believe that such a public display of royal favor meant he was safe? It seems he simply did not understand the nature of the man he was dealing with, a king who could honor you in public while signing your death warrant in private. Historians have long debated Jacques de Molay's leadership. Was he a competent but tragically flawed leader? A good soldier who was simply unprepared for the political machinations of the French court? Or was he a weakened, indecisive Grand Master, whose pride and poor judgment contributed directly to the order's destruction? Some evidence suggests he was aware of the rampant corruption and loss of discipline within some of the European preceptories. But he did little to address it, focusing instead on his dream of a new crusade. He was in many ways looking backward at a glorious past, unable to see the immediate and deadly threat standing right in front of him. You observe him from a distance. This old warrior who is your leader, you feel a sense of pity for him. He seems to be operating under a code of honor that his enemies have long since abandoned. He trusts in the sanctity of his office, in the Pope's protection, in the righteousness of his cause. He believes that truth and justice will prevail. He doesn't seem to realize that his opponent, King Philip, has rewritten the rules of the game. The king is not interested in justice. He is interested in victory at any cost. Molay's presence in Paris, along with the bulk of the Templar leadership in their main treasury, is a fatal strategic error. He has gathered all of the order's most valuable assets, its leaders, its prestige, and its cash in one single location, directly under the nose of his most powerful enemy. He has unwittingly made Philip's job incredibly easy. The trap is being set, and the bait this tired, honorable old man has walked right into it. He thinks he is here to plan a war. He does not realize he is the primary target in a war that has already begun. The air of unreality in Paris is thick with a purpose that no one can quite name. The Grand Master talks of new crusades, but you and your brothers know deep down that this is a fantasy. The reason for your existence, the very core of your identity for the past centuries, has vanished. The Holy Land is lost. This isn't a recent event, but a wound that has been festering for over a decade. The end came in 1291, at the city of Acre. Acre was the last great Crusader bastion on the mainland, a bustling, wealthy port city, and the headquarters of the Templars had been moved there after the loss of Jerusalem. It was the capital of a kingdom that had shrunk to little more than a coastal strip. You have heard the stories from the veterans, the old knights whose eyes still hold the horror of those final days. The siege was brutal. The Mamluk Sultan, Abashir Khalil, arrived with one of the largest armies ever seen in the region. Equipped with massive siege engines that pounded the city walls day and night, the defenders were a fraction of the Mamluk force, a desperate coalition of Templars, Hospitals, Teutonic Knights, and the city as garrison. The Templars were, by all accounts, heroic. They fought with a grim determination, holding their section of the wall against impossible odds. The Grand Master of the time, a man named Guillaume de Beaujeu, was a seasoned warrior who had spent his life fighting for the Holy Land. He was also a pragmatist. At one point, he was accused of cowardice by a hot-headed young knight for not leading a charge. His reply became famous: "I am not running away. I am dead." A moment later, a Mamluk arrow struck him down. His death signaled the end. The city walls were breached, and the Mamluk army poured in. What followed was a massacre. The city was sacked and burned. The remaining Templars, a small, battered group, retreated to their main fortress by the sea, a massive, imposing structure. They held out for a few more days, a last island of defiance in a sea of destruction, and here lies a little-known, tragic detail of the final moments. The Mamluks offered the remaining Templars, under the command of their marshal, Pierre d'Esivire, a deal safe passage to Cyprus if they surrendered the fortress. The Templars accepted, but when a group of Mamluk soldiers entered the fortress and began harassing the women and children who had taken refuge there, the Templars' vows kicked back in. They couldn't stand by. They drew their swords and killed the Mamluk detachment, sealing their own fate. The battle resumed. The Sultan's engineers began undermining the fortress walls. In the end, the structure collapsed, killing the last defenders and many of the attackers in a cloud of dust and rubble. The fall of Acre was a devastating blow, not just militarily, but psychologically. For 200 years, the Templars had been the defenders of the Holy Land. Now, there was nothing left to defend. The survivors, including a wounded Jacques de Malay, retreated to the island of Cyprus. They established a new headquarters there, but it felt hollow. Cyprus was a base, not a cause. This is the core of your current crisis. Back in France, surrounded by your wealth and your vast estates, you are an organization without a job. Your primary function has been rendered obsolete. You are a standing army with no war to fight, and a very, very expensive standing army at that. The donations from the faithful across Europe were given to support the war in the East. But now that the war is lost, people are starting to ask a very reasonable question: what are we paying for? Historians still debate the impact of the fall of Acre on the Templars' eventual fate. Some argue it was the single most important factor. By losing their raison d'etre, they became vulnerable. They were perceived as a wealthy, arrogant, and now useless institution, ripe for the picking. Their military purpose had vanished, leaving only their financial and political power exposed. Others contend that the order could have survived and adapted. They could have transitioned, perhaps focusing their efforts on fighting the Moors in Spain, or becoming a purely financial institution. The fall of Acre didn't doom them, this argument goes. The failure of their leadership to find a new mission did. As you walk through the cloisters of the Paris Temple, you feel the aimlessness. The younger knights still train, but for what? The older knights seem lost, caught between a past that is gone and a future that is uncertain. There's a sense of drift, of an organization that has lost its way. Jacques de Molay's talk of a new crusade feels less like a strategic plan and more like a desperate attempt to turn back the clock, to recapture a purpose that history has already taken from you. This lack of a clear mission makes you an easy target for criticism. Rumors and accusations find fertile ground in this atmosphere of uncertainty. People see your castles and your riches, and they no longer see the noble warriors defending Christendom. They see a powerful corporation that seems to be doing little more than collecting rents and hoarding wealth. You are a solution to a problem that no longer exists. And in the cold, pragmatic eyes of a king like Philip the Fair, an obsolete and wealthy institution is not something to be revered. It's something to be dismantled. The aimlessness you feel inside the temple walls begins to find a disturbing echo in the world outside. The way people look at you has changed. It's subtle at first. The merchant who once greeted you with deference now averts his gaze. The children who once stared in awe at your white mantle now seem to whisper behind their hands as you pass. The air has shifted. The respect you once commanded has curdled into something else, a mixture of envy, suspicion, and fear. You are witnessing the first phase of King Philip's war. It is not a war of swords and sieges, but of words and whispers. It's a carefully orchestrated campaign of public opinion, a masterpiece of medieval fake news. And its architect is the king's right-hand man, the chillingly efficient Guillaume de Noguerat. Noguerat is a lawyer, not a soldier. His loyalty to Philip is absolute, and his methods are surgical. He understands that to attack an institution as revered as the Templars, you cannot simply use force. You must first destroy their reputation. You must poison the well of public opinion, so that when the blow finally falls, people will nod and say, "I'm not surprised." I heard stories, and so the stories begin to circulate. They start as vague murmurs in taverns and marketplaces. They speak of the Templars' immense wealth, implying it was ill-gotten. They speak of the order's arrogance, of their refusal to be governed by anyone but a distant pope. These are believable accusations because they contain a kernel of truth. You are wealthy. You are privileged. In the current climate of discontent, these facts are easily twisted into crimes. Then the whispers become more specific, more sinister. They are no longer just about greed, but about empathy. Stories of secret, nocturnal meetings, of vast treasures hoarded in your vaults while the kingdom starves, of dealings with the Saracens not as enemies on the battlefield, but as secret partners in some nefarious plot. Your past role as diplomats and negotiators is now being reframed as treachery. The true genius of the campaign lies in its source. The accusations are not seen to be coming directly from the king. That would be too obvious. Instead, they seem to bubble up from below, from disgruntled peasants, jealous local priests, and, most damningly, from former members of the order. And here you learn of a shadowy figure, a man named Desquille de Floira. He is the perfect tool for no Garrett-esque purposes. He claimed to have been a Templar himself, a prior from Montfaucon, who was cast out of the order for his crimes. He was, by all accounts, a scoundrel and an opportunist. He began peddling stories about the Templars' supposed secret heresies. He claimed that during their secret initiation ceremonies, new recruits were forced to deny Jesus Christ, to spit upon the crucifix, and to engage in obscene rituals. It's a shocking, scandalous tale. He apparently tried to sell his story first to the King of Aragon, who didn't believe him. But in the French court, he found a very receptive audience. This is where historians still argue passionately. Did Philip and No Garrett invent these charges from whole cloth? Using a convenient liar like de Floy ran to give them a veneer of authenticity. Was it a completely cynical fabrication designed to justify the seizure of your assets? This is the most widely accepted theory. However, another, more unsettling possibility is sometimes considered. Could there have been a grain of truth, however twisted, in the accusations? The Templar order was vast, old, and secretive. Is it possible that in some remote preceptor IES, far from the eyes of the Grand Master, some strange, unorthodox rituals had developed over time? Some scholars have speculated that perhaps the ritual of spitting on the cross was a symbolic act, designed to test a recruit's faith or to simulate the kind of humiliation he might face if captured by the enemy. It was a test of loyalty that, when described out of context by a hostile witness, could easily be portrayed as genuine, soul-damning heresy. You don't know what to believe. The accusations are so monstrous, so contrary to everything you have dedicated your life to, that they seem impossible. To spit on the cross you wear over your heart, to deny the Savior you have sworn to serve. It's unthinkable, and yet, the stories persist. They are repeated, embellished, and spread by the king's agents. They are designed to be shocking, to capture the imagination of a pious and superstitious populace. You feel a sense of profound helplessness. How do you fight a rumor? You can't meet it on a battlefield. You can't challenge it to a duel. It's a ghost, an invisible poison seeping into the foundations of your world. Malay and the leadership seem to do nothing, either because they underestimate the danger, or because they simply don't know how to respond to such an unconventional attack. They continue to meet with the Pope's legates and discuss plans for a crusade, while the ground is being systematically cut out from under their feet. The smear campaign is working. By the late summer of 1307, the name Templar is no longer synonymous with hero. It is becoming synonymous with heretic. The stage is being set. The audience is being primed. All that is needed now is for the curtain to rise. And you have a sickening feeling that No Garrett has already written the script for the final act. The late summer air of 1307 hangs heavy and humid over Paris. The whispers against you have grown louder, but there is still a sense of detached unreality. These are just words you tell yourself. The order has faced criticism before. It will pass. Your faith is in the Pope and the Grand Master, in the sheer, unshakable history of your institution. You carry on with your duties, overseeing the meticulous accounts of the Paris Temple, an island of order and routine in a sea of uncertainty. You are completely unaware that the end is not just coming. It has already been planned, down to the very last detail. The order is given not in a public decree or a declaration of war, but in the deepest secrecy. King Philip IV, in consultation with his chief minister, Guillaume Dino Garrett, and a small circle of trusted advisors drafts a document. It is, in its own way, a masterpiece of administrative ruthlessness. It is a letter, a royal command, to be sent to every seneschal, bailiff, and royal agent in every corner of the French kingdom. This letter is the culmination of months, if not years, of preparation. It lays out the king's justification for the action he is about to take. It speaks of the bitter sorrow and immense pain with which he has learned of the Templars' heresies. It paints a vivid, horrifying picture of the crimes they are accused of denying Christ, spitting on the cross, idolatry, and all manner of depravity. The language is not that of a legal document, but of a religious sermon. It's designed to inflame, to horrify, and to leave no doubt in the mind of the recipient that they are acting on God's behalf, through his chosen representative, the King of France. But the most crucial part of the document is the instructions. It commands the royal agents to prepare, in absolute secrecy, to carry out a simultaneous, coordinated raid on every single Templar property within their jurisdiction. Every castle, every preceptory, every farm, every house. The operation is to be swift, sudden, and overwhelming. They are to arrest every member of the order, from the highest commander to the lowliest serving brother. They are to seize all property, all goods, all lands, and all documents, sealing them under the king's authority. And then comes the most chilling instruction of all, the date. The letter is to be delivered to the agents weeks in advance, but it is to remain sealed until the night of Thursday, October 12th. It is not to be opened or acted upon before then. The arrests themselves are to take place in the pre-dawn hours of the very next day, Friday, October 13th, Yolsendingchi. The logistical planning required for this is staggering. Hundreds of letters, all bearing the royal seal, are dispatched by trusted messengers across the entire country. The secrecy is absolute. Not a word leaks out. The king and his ministers have created a perfect information vacuum. While you go about your daily prayers and duties, the vast, invisible net is slowly being drawn tight around you and every one of your brothers in France. There is a strange and often overlooked detail about the king's secret instructions. He orders his agents not just to arrest the Templars, but to promise them that if they confess to their heresies, they will be treated with mercy and reconciled with the church. If they refuse to confess, however, the agents are instructed to use torture. The outcome is preordained. The goal is not to conduct an investigation to find the truth. The goal is to produce confessions by any means necessary. The verdict has been decided before the trial has even begun. Historians still marvel at the sheer efficiency and audacity of Philip's plan. It was a police action on a scale that medieval Europe had never seen before. To maintain such secrecy across an entire kingdom for weeks is a testament to the power and control that Philip had managed to centralize in the French monarchy. It was an operation that required absolute loyalty and a sophisticated administrative machine. Philip had both. The debate among scholars is not about what happened, but about its legality and justification. Was this the act of a pious king genuinely horrified by heresy, using his God-given authority to cleanse his kingdom? This is the narrative Philip himself promoted. Or was it an illegal act of state-sponsored terrorism, a cynical plot by a bankrupt monarch to steal the Templars' wealth and eliminate a political rival? From the perspective of papal authority, Philip's actions were a shocking overreach. He was a secular ruler initiating an attack on a religious order that was under the direct protection of the Pope. He was, in effect, usurping the Pope's authority and launching his own inquisition. You, of course, know none of this. In early October, you might even feel a sense of relief. The Grand Master Jacques de Molay is in Paris, and things seem to be proceeding as normal. The tension of the summer seems to have eased. You sleep in your dormitory in the Paris Temple, a fortress in the heart of the capital, feeling secure. You are a soldier of Christ, a member of the most powerful order in Christendom. You are untouchable. Outside your walls, the trap is set. The messengers have delivered their secret letters. The royal agents have made their quiet preparations. All across France, hundreds of men are waiting, holding a secret that will shatter your world. They are waiting for the sun to set on Thursday, October 12th. They are waiting for the dawn of Friday the 13th. The night of Thursday, October 12th, is unremarkable. You attend Compline, the final prayer of the day, the soft Latin chants echoing in the stone chapel of the Paris Temple. You retire to the dormitory, just as you have done countless times before. You sleep the dreamless sleep of a man accustomed to routine and discipline. The fortress-like walls of the temple surround you, a symbol of your strength and security. You are in the heart of your own power, with the Grand Master himself sleeping under the same roof. Nothing feels amiss. The waking is brutal. It is not the familiar, gentle tolling of the bell for matins. It is the splintering of wood, the shouting of unfamiliar voices, the clang of steel on stone. You are jolted awake in the pre-dawn darkness. The single lamp that always burns in the dormitory casts flickering, chaotic shadows. Men are pouring into the room. They are not your brothers. They are soldiers, the king's men, armed and unsmiling. They are led by Guillaume de Nogaret himself. Confusion reigns. You stumble from your cot, reaching for a sword that isn't there. You are a warrior, but you are clad only in your sleeping tunic. You are surrounded, overwhelmed before you are even fully awake. There is no resistance. How could there be? You are not prepared for a fight. You were prepared for prayer. The scene that unfolds in the Paris Temple is being replicated at this exact moment in hundreds of locations all across France. In the Grand Preceptories of the countryside, in the small, isolated farmhouses, the same scene is playing out. Royal agents, acting on the secret orders they received weeks ago, are kicking in doors, storming chapels, and rousing sleeping Templars from their beds. The surprise is total. The operation is executed with chilling military precision. You are herded into the main courtyard with your brothers. The Grand Master Jacques de Molay is there, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. The old warrior looks confused, his dignity stripped away, a prisoner in his own headquarters. You are all prisoners. You are bound, your hands tied tightly behind your backs. The white mantles that have been your pride and your identity are ripped from your shoulders. You are no longer Templars. You are simply men, cold and afraid in the murky light of the approaching dawn. This day, Friday, October 13th, will go down in history. Its association with bad luck and misfortune is a direct echo of this event, a folk memory of the day a great and powerful order was brought down in a single morning. This detail is a fascinating piece of historical trivia that has embedded itself in Western superstition. While many people know Friday, the 13th, is unlucky, few know it traces its roots back to this specific, brutal police action. As the sun rises over Paris, the scale of the operation becomes clear. Every single Templar in France has been arrested. It is an administrative miracle of terror. The king's men are thorough. They don't just arrest the knights. They arrest the sergeants, the chaplains, the serving brothers, even the farmhands who work on Templar lands. They seize everything. The vaults of the Paris Temple, which acted as the royal treasury, are sealed. The ledgers, the charters, the secret coded documents of your financial network, all are now in the hands of the king. You are marched out of the temple gates, not as proud warriors, but as a shuffling column of captives. The people of Paris have begun to gather in the streets. They stare at you. Their faces a mixture of shock, curiosity, and a kind of grim satisfaction. The king's propaganda campaign has done its work. They don't see heroes being betrayed. They see heretics getting there just deserts. The whispers have become a public spectacle. Historians still debate the legality and morality of this day. Under the laws of the church, Philip had no authority to arrest you. You were answerable only to the Pope. The king had initiated a direct assault on papal prerogative. He had, in essence, declared that the authority of the French crown was superior to that of the Holy See within his own kingdom. It was a bold and revolutionary claim, a pivotal moment in the long struggle between secular and religious power in Europe. Some academics see this as a key event in the formation of the modern nation-state, the moment when the king's law decisively triumphed over the churches. Others view it more simply as the largest organized crime in medieval history, a robbery conducted under the guise of piety. But for you, there are no grand theories of history or politics. There is only the cold, hard reality of your situation. The rope bites into your wrists. The faces in the crowd are hostile. The world has been turned upside down in the space of a few hours. Yesterday you were a member of a powerful, privileged elite. Today you are a helpless prisoner, accused of the most vile crimes imaginable. You are being led away, though you don't yet know where. You don't know what will happen next. All you know is that the life you knew is over, destroyed in the darkness of a single morning. The era of the Templars has ended not with a bang, but with the sound of a splintering door in the pre-dawn quiet. The transition from the open air of the street to the suffocating darkness of the dungeon is a physical shock. You are shoved down a flight of slick, mossy stone steps, the air growing colder and damper with each one. The heavy wooden door groans shut behind you, and the sound of the iron bolts sliding into place is the sound of finality. You are plunged into a world of near total blackness, the only light a faint gray line filtering through a tiny, barred slit high up in the wall. The air is foul, thick with the smell of stale water, human waste, and despair. This is your new home. A small, cramped cell, perhaps shared with one or two of your brothers. There is no furniture, only a pile of damp, rotting straw in one corner. The silence is a heavy blanket, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the darkness and the distant, muffled sounds of the fortress above. You have been cast into one of the king's prisons, a place designed not for rehabilitation but for forgetting. The first days are a blur of confusion and disbelief. How could this happen? Where is the Pope? Why is the Grand Master not speaking out? You and your cellmates whisper these questions to each other in the dark, your voices hoarse. You are soldiers, trained for battle and hardship, but this is a different kind of warfare. It is a war of the mind, a siege of the spirit. There is no enemy to fight, no line to hold. There is only waiting. You quickly learn the brutal rhythm of prison life. Once a day, a guard slides a wooden bowl of thin, watery soup and a chunk of hard, black bread through a slot in the door. It's barely enough to sustain life. The water you are given is stale and tastes of metal. The cold is constant, seeping into your bones from the stone floor, a relentless ache that never goes away. But the physical deprivation is nothing compared to the psychological torment. You are completely isolated from the outside world. You have no news of your other brothers, no word from the papal court, no information about what is happening. Your world is shrunk to the four damp walls of this cell. The king's strategy is clear: break you down, soften you up, strip away your identity as a Templar and leave you as nothing more than a terrified, isolated man. One of the strangest and most cruel deprivations is the denial of religious rites. You are accused of being heretics, and so you are denied the comfort of the faith you are accused of betraying. There is no mass, no confession, no priest to offer solace. For men whose entire lives have been structured around daily prayer and devotion, this is a profound and terrifying emptiness. It's a form of spiritual starvation. The king's men know that a knight's strength comes from his brotherhood. Your power on the battlefield came from your discipline, your trust in the man next to you. So they systematically dismantle that brotherhood. You are deliberately held in isolation or in small, mixed groups. A knight from a wealthy Parisian family might be thrown in with a simple serving brother from the south whom he has never met. The bonds of your command structure are intentionally broken, and then the interrogations begin. You are not brought before a judge in a court of law. You are dragged from your cell, often in the middle of the night, to a small, windowless room. The only people there are a few of the king's agents and a clerk, seated at a small table with parchment and ink. They don't ask you what happened. They tell you what you did. They read from a prepared list of charges, the same bizarre and horrifying accusations you heard whispers of before your arrest. This is where you learn about a particularly insidious historical debate. For centuries, people have wondered how so many brave knights could have confessed to such outrageous crimes. The answer is found in this room. The traditional historical view is that the confessions were extracted almost exclusively through torture. But some modern scholars have refined this view, suggesting a more complex, two-pronged approach. The first stage was psychological. The isolation, the starvation, the fear, all were designed to break a man's spirit. Only when that failed did they resort to the second stage, physical torment. It was just violence. It was a systematic process of dehumanization. For now they are just talking. They promise you mercy if you confess. They tell you that your brothers have already confessed. They tell you the Grand Master himself has admitted everything. They are lies, of course, but in the darkness of your cell, with no way to verify the truth, the lies begin to take root. Doubt is a poison, and you have been left alone with it for a very long time. You deny everything. You are a soldier of Christ. You have never spat on the cross. You have never denied your Savior. You cling to your vows, to the truth of your life. The interrogators just smile. They are in no hurry. They have all the time in the world. They send you back to your cell, back to the cold and the hunger and the silence. But now, a new fear has been added to the mix. The fear of what comes next. The fear of what happens when their patience runs out. You lie in the dark, listening to the dripping water, and you realize that the battle for your body is over. The battle for your soul has just begun. After weeks of isolation and psychological pressure, the interrogations enter a new phase. You are dragged once again from your cell, but this time the atmosphere in the room is different. It's colder. There is an air of grim purpose. The king's agents are no longer making promises of mercy. They are holding a document, a long roll of parchment. A clerk begins to read, his voice a droning monotone in the still, torch-lit room. This is the formal list of charges, the official indictment against you and the entire order. There are over 100 of them. As you listen, a sense of dizzying absurdity washes over you. The charges are a grotesque carnival of blasphemy and perversion, a detailed tapestry woven from the threads of rumor and paranoid fantasy you heard circulating before your arrest. The first set of accusations focuses on your initiation ceremony. You are accused of, upon entry into the order, being forced to deny Jesus Christ 3 times. You are accused of spitting, trampling, or urinating on a crucifix as a sign of contempt for the faith. This is the cornerstone of the entire case against you. It is the charge of apostasy, the ultimate betrayal. Then, the list descends into even stranger territory. You are accused of worshipping an idol. The descriptions are vague and contradictory. Some say it was a severed head with a beard. Others say it had 3 faces. Some claim it was a wooden statue. Others a painted image. They give it a name, Baphomet. The name means nothing to you. You have never seen or heard of such a thing. It sounds like something from a nightmare. You are also accused of bestowing upon this head the power to make the order rich and the land fertile. The charges continue, each one more lurid than the last. You are accused of institutionalized sodomy, with the indictment claiming that brothers were encouraged and even ordered to engage in homosexual acts. You are accused of holding your chapter meetings in secret and at night, which, while true, is now framed as proof of a sinister conspiracy. You are accused of absolving sins, a power reserved only for ordained priests, with your lay masters supposedly granting absolution to their knights. This twists your internal disciplinary practices into a form of heresy. You are even accused of financial crimes. The list claims you acquired property and wealth through illicit means and that you did not give proper charity, hoarding your immense riches for your own secret purposes. This charge, at least, has a recognizable, if twisted, root. You are wealthy, and this wealth is clearly the ultimate prize. There is a particularly strange and less famous charge. Buried in the long list, the accusation that you were instructed to bind the head of a deceased Templar with a cord, which was then to be worn by other brothers as a sacred relic. It's a bizarre detail that speaks to the fevered imagination of those who drafted the document. It combines accusations of idolatry with a hint of necromancy, designed to make you seem not just heretical but alien and inhuman. As the clerk's voice drones on, you realize the brilliance of this monstrous document. It's a scattergun approach. The sheer number and variety of the accusations are overwhelming. They are designed to stick in the public imagination, to create a sense of no smoke without fire. If you deny one charge, there are 100 others waiting. The list mixes plausible-sounding accusations, secrecy, wealth with fantastical ones, idol worship, necromancy, creating a collage of criminality that is impossible to refute systematically. Historians have spent centuries deconstructing this list of charges. The origin of the name Baphomet is one of the most enduring puzzles. Where did it come from? There is no mention of it in any known Templar documents. Some scholars believe it was a simple mistranscription, a garbled French version of Mahomet, the old French spelling for Muhammad. The accusation would then be that the Templars, through their long contact with the East, had secretly converted to Islam. This was a common and inflammatory charge to level against anyone who had spent time in the Holy Land. Others have proposed more esoteric origins, linking it to Gnostic or Kabbalistic traditions, though there is little hard evidence for this. The most likely explanation, however, is that it was largely an invention, a spooky, for unsounding name created specifically for the trial to give a name to the faceless idol you were accused of worshipping. The academic debate also rages over the charge of heresy itself. Were the Templars heretics? The overwhelming consensus among mainstream historians is no. The charges were fabricated. The trial was a sham, motivated by greed and political ambition. However, a small but persistent school of thought argues that while the specific charges were likely exaggerated or invented, the Templars may have held some unorthodox beliefs or engaged in syncretic rituals that were a blend of Christian and Eastern esoteric traditions. This view is not widely supported by evidence but feeds into the more romantic, conspiracy theory version of the Templar myth. For you, in this cold room, there are no academic theories. There is only the sickening reality of the words being read. You are being accused of being the opposite of everything you are. You are a monk accused of spitting on the cross. You are a warrior for Christ accused of worshipping a demonic head. You are a brother in a celibate order accused of institutionalized perversion. The list is not an indictment. It is an inversion, a black mirror held up to your life, twisting everything you hold sacred into a monstrous caricature. And you know with a chilling certainty that the men in this room will not stop until they have forced you to agree that the reflection in that mirror is the truth. The interrogator's patience has finally run out. Your steadfast denials, your insistence on the truth, are no longer met with smiles and false promises. They are met with a cold, hard stare and a quiet order to the guards. You are not taken back to your cell. You are taken deeper into the bowels of the fortress, to a place you have only heard about in fearful whispers. The air becomes heavy, and you can hear a faint, rhythmic creaking sound, along with something else low, animalistic moaning that you pray is not human. This is the torture chamber. It is a room designed for one purpose, to inflict pain so unbearable that the victim will say or do anything to make it stop. The instruments are all here laid out with a tradesman's neatness, ropes and pulleys, braziers filled with glowing coals, vises and racks. The men who operate this machinery are not the king's lawyers. They are thick-set, silent men with muscular arms and dead eyes. They are craftsmen, and the human body is their material. What happens next is a blur of agony. The methods used on you and your brothers are well documented, pulled from the standard, brutal toolkit of medieval justice. The most common is the strap pardue. Your hands are tied behind your back, and a rope is slung over a beam in the ceiling. You are hoisted into the air, your arms wrenched from their sockets. The pain is a searing, white-hot fire in your shoulders. They leave you hanging there, asking the same questions over and over. Did you deny Christ? Did you spit on the cross? Did you worship the head? Through the haze of pain you try to say no, but the words won't come out. If that doesn't work, they might move you to the rack. You are laid on a wooden frame, your ankles and wrists chained to rollers at either end. A tourniquet slowly begins to stretch you, pulling your joints apart. Every muscle in your body screams in protest. The pressure builds until you feel your ligaments tearing, your bones grinding against each other. The clerk is still there, his quill poised, ready to write down your confession the moment a sound that could be interpreted as yes escapes your lips. There is also the ordeal by fire. They grease the soles of your feet with animal fat and hold them close to a brazier of hot coals. Your skin blisters, blackens, and burns. The smell of your own cooking flesh fills the air. It is a pain so absolute, so all-consuming that your mind detaches. You are floating somewhere above, looking down at the pathetic, screaming creature that used to be you. This is how the confessions are obtained. This is the simple, brutal answer to the question of how hundreds of proud knights could admit to such impossible crimes. Under this kind of torment, truth becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. The only thing that matters is making the pain stop. The interrogators are not seeking information. They are seeking confirmation. They already have the answers they want written down on their list of charges. They just need you to validate them. There's a particularly cruel and little-known aspect of this process related to the legal framework of the time. According to the rules of the Inquisition, which Philip's agents were now unofficially emulating, a confession obtained under torture had to be freely repeated the next day, outside the torture chamber, to be considered valid. This created a legal fiction of consent. A Templar would be tortured until he agreed to confess. The next day, battered and broken, he would be brought before the clerk. The clerk would ask him if his confession from the previous day was true. If the man, remembering the agony and knowing it could be repeated at any moment, said yes, it was written down as a free and voluntary admission of guilt. If he found a last ounce of courage and recanted, he would be deemed a relapsed heretic and could be taken back to the chamber to be tortured again, often more severely, as punishment for his stubbornness. It was a perfect, self-contained system for manufacturing guilt. The historical debate here is not about whether torture was used, it's abundantly and gruesomely documented. The debate is about its universality. Were all the confessions a product of torture? Almost certainly not. Some knights likely confessed out of fear, hearing the screams of their brothers from the chamber next door. Some may have confessed because they were promised that a quick admission was the fastest way to get the Pope's attention and receive a fair trial from the Church. They believed they were navigating a corrupt system, and a false confession was just a temporary step. A few, particularly the weaker or more isolated brothers, might have even come to believe the lies, their minds broken by the psychological torment long before their bodies were. But for the majority, the explanation is written in the language of scars and dislocated joints. You hold out for as long as you can. You cling to your honor, to your vows, to the man you were. But eventually, a moment comes when the pain becomes your entire universe. There is no past, no future, no God, no honor. There is only the fire on your feet or the tearing in your shoulders. And in that moment you break. A word, a nod, a groan, it's all they need. The clerk squills scratches on the parchment. Your name is added to the long list of Templars who have confessed. You are carried back to your cell, a broken shell of a man, and left in the darkness with the ghost of your own voice admitting to crimes you never committed. In the haze of pain and recovery in your cell, one word from the interrogations echoes louder than the rest: Baphomet. It is the centerpiece of your forced confession, the most sensational and bizarre of all the charges. Your torturers were obsessed with it. They demanded to know what it looked like, where it was kept, how you worshipped it. Since you had never heard the word before your arrest, you had no answers to give, which only made them more certain you were hiding something. Under duress, you, like many of your brothers, probably ended up just confirming whatever description they offered, creating a confession out of their own leading questions. Now, in the quiet moments between interrogations, you tried to make sense of it. What is this Baphomet? The interrogator spoke of it as if it were a real, physical object, an idol, a head. Your mind reels, trying to find any practice or relic within the order that could have been so grotesquely twisted. Could they have meant the Shroud of Turin? This is a popular theory, though it has major chronological problems. The shroud, the famous linen cloth bearing the image of a crucified man, was in the possession of the Di Charni family, a family with strong Templar connections. The theory suggests the Templars secretly venerated the face on the shroud, and that this practice, when viewed by hostile outsiders, was misconstrued as the worship of a disembodied head. It's a tantalizing idea, linking the Templars to one of Christianity's most mysterious relics, but most mainstream historians dismiss it due to a lack of direct evidence from the trial period. Could it have been something else? The order did possess numerous holy relics. Like all major religious institutions of the time, you had fragments of the true crossbones of saints and other sacred objects. Perhaps the most plausible candidate is the relic of the head of Saint Euphemia of Chalcedon, which was kept in one of the Templar preceptor IES in Constantinople. It's possible that rumors of the Templars possessing a head relic were twisted and merged with the accusations of idolatry to create the sinister Baphomet. Then there's the more symbolic interpretation. Some scholars have wondered if Baphomet was not a physical object at all, but a representation of a secret doctrine. Was it a symbol of the Gnostic Sophia wisdom or some other esoteric concept? that the Templars might have absorbed from their contact with Eastern philosophies. This line of thinking opens the door to the idea that the Templars were not just soldiers, but guardians of a secret heretical knowledge. It's a romantic and enduring myth, but it remains almost entirely in the realm of speculation, not history. The historical consensus remains that Baphomet was most likely a fabrication of the accusers. As mentioned before, a simple linguistic corruption of Muhammad remains the most straightforward, if least exciting, explanation. The charge was that you had become secret Muslims. Then Baphomet was the scary-sounding name for the idol you supposedly worship. But there is a specific, strange detail in some of the confessions that adds another layer of mystery. A few of the tortured knights confessed that the head had 2 or 3 faces. This is a particularly odd detail. Where could it have come from? One less known theory ties this to Roman art. The Roman god Janus, the god of doorways and transitions, was famously depicted with 2 faces, one looking to the past and one to the future. Is it possible that the Templars, who often built their preceptor IS on old Roman sites, had found an ancient Janus head and kept it as a curiosity? In the superstitious medieval mind, such a pagan artifact could easily be seen as an object of demonic worship. It's a fringe theory, but it highlights how even an innocent archaeological find could have become damning evidence in the hands of the king's men. Lying in your cell, you have no access to these grand historical theories. All you have is your own experience. You search your memory, replaying every chapter meeting, every ceremony, every ritual you ever took part in. There was no head. There was no idol. There was no Baphomet. The centerpiece of the king's case against you is a phantom. It's a lie, constructed to be as terrifying and as improbable as possible. You begin to understand the truly diabolical nature of the accusation. How can you disprove the existence of a secret idol? The very fact that no one has ever seen it is twisted into proof of how well you have guarded your secret. Your denials are not seen as evidence of your innocence, but as proof of your cunning and your loyalty to a hidden heretical cult. The Baphomet myth, you realize, is a perfect trap. It has no basis in reality, which makes it impossible to refute with facts. Its power lies entirely in the imagination of the accusers and the public. It transforms you from mere political opponents or financial targets into something much worse, a shadowy, demonic other. It justifies any and all actions taken against you. Because you wouldn't support the destruction of men who secretly worship a monstrous, disembodied head, the king and no Garrett didn't just need to make you criminals. They needed to make you monsters. And in the terrifying, non-existent figure of Baphomet, they found their monster. For months, you have been locked in the king's dungeons, subject to his interrogators and his torturers. The only world you have known is one of pain and fear, orchestrated entirely by Philip's agents. But then, one day, the routine changes. New faces appear at your cell door. They are not the king's men. They are clerics, representatives of a papal commission. A spark of hope, long dormant, flickers within you. The Pope has finally intervened. Pope Clement V has been playing a desperate game of political catch-up ever since the arrests. Philip's surprise action was a direct challenge to his authority, and he knows it. He cannot let a secular king unilaterally destroy a religious order. After the initial shock, Clement issued a papal bull ordering Philip to hand over all the Templar prisoners and their property to the control of the Church. He announced that the Church, and the Church alone, would investigate the charges against the order. It seems like a victory. It seems like the moment you have been praying for. The king's illegal proceedings are to be halted, and a proper papal inquiry will begin. You might actually get a fair hearing. But Philip is not a man to be so easily outmaneuvered. He agrees in principle to hand over the prisoners, but it's a strategic concession, not a surrender. He knows he has the most valuable weapon, your confessions. Before transferring you to papal custody, he launches a propaganda blitz, publishing the coerced confessions across France and Europe. He sends his agents to the Pope, showing him the signed statements, including one from the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, who had confessed under immense pressure shortly after the arrests. Philip's message to Clement is clear. This is not my investigation anymore. It's yours. But the leaders of the order have already admitted their guilt. If you find them innocent, you will be seen as protecting heretics. He has set a political trap. The papal commission that arrives to interview you is therefore operating in a very difficult environment. They are churchmen, and their process is different. The interrogations are no longer focused on inflicting pain to extract a pre-written confession. They are inquiries designed to gather testimony. For the first time in months, you are asked questions by men who seem to genuinely want to hear your side of the story. This is the turning point. As you and your brothers are brought before the papal commissioners, something remarkable happens. Away from the immediate threat of the king's torturers, your courage begins to return. One by one, Templars who had confessed under duress now recant their confessions. You tell the commissioners the truth. You describe the torture, the fear, the lies. You explain how your confessions were obtained. You swear your loyalty to the church and your innocence of all the charges. A powerful defense of the order begins to form. Hundreds of knights step forward to speak. They are led by two brave and eloquent Templars, Pierre de Boulogne and Renaud de Provence, who act as your unofficial lawyers. They organize the defense, challenging the legality of the king's initial actions on systematically refuting the list of charges. For a moment, it looks like the truth might actually prevail. The papal commission is gathering a mountain of testimony that paints a clear picture of the king's conspiracy. The tide seems to be turning. There is a small but crucial detail in this process that is often overlooked. The papal inquiries were held in different locations, and the outcomes varied wildly depending on the local political climate. In kingdoms outside of France, like England, Spain, and Cyprus, where the king had no interest in destroying the order, the Templars were almost universally found to be innocent. The papal commissions in those regions found no evidence of heresy. This fact alone is one of the strongest arguments for the order's innocence. The accusations only seem to stick in the one place where the monarch stood to gain millions by their downfall. The academic debate on this phase of the trial is intense. Why did Philip agree to the papal investigation at all? Was it a moment of weakness, or a calculated risk? The prevailing theory is that Philip was supremely confident that the initial confessions he had secured would be enough to guarantee a conviction. He underestimated the courage of the Templars and their capacity to organize a defense. Once the threat of immediate torture was removed, he thought the game was already won. Another view suggests that Philip was playing a longer game. He needed the Pope's seal of approval to make the dissolution of the order legitimate in the eyes of Christendom, which was necessary for him to legally seize their international assets. He was willing to risk a papal inquiry because he knew he held the ultimate trump card: physical control of the prisoners and the ability to apply pressure whenever he needed to. Standing before the Pope's men, you feel a sense of hope you thought was gone forever. You speak your truth. You see hundreds of your brothers doing the same. You are fighting back, not with swords but with words. The power of the king's lies seems to be fading in the face of your collective testimony. It feels like the beginning of your vindication. You believe that the church will now protect you. You believe that the nightmare is almost over. You have no idea that the king is about to make his next move. A move so brutal and so decisive that it will shatter your newfound hope into a million pieces. Just as the tide seems to be turning in your favor, a devastating blow comes from the one man you look to as your ultimate leader, the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. He is brought before the papal commissioners at Chinon, along with other high-ranking dignitaries of the order. This is his moment, his chance to lead the defense, to inspire his men, to publicly decry the king's actions and proclaim the order's innocence. Instead, he falters before the Pope's representatives. The old warrior repeats the confession he had made to the king's men shortly after his arrest. He is no longer under immediate threat of torture. He is in the custody of the church. And yet, he admits to the charges. He confesses to the denial of Christ and the spitting on the cross during his own long-ago initiation. He is weary, confused, and likely terrified of what the king might still do to him. He is an old man who has been broken, and his confession sends a shockwave through the proceedings. He does, however, add a crucial caveat. He confesses only to the charges of apostasy and spitting on the cross. He vehemently denies the more lurid accusations of heresy, idolatry, and sodomy. And he insists that while he was made to perform these acts, he did so with his mind and heart still loyal to Christ. He also adds that this practice was a corrupt, misguided custom within the order, not a true reflection of its faith. It's a muddled, partial confession, An attempt to find some middle ground, but the damage is done. The headline is simple: the Grand Master has confessed. Why did he do it? This is one of the most debated questions of the entire Templar affair. Was he simply a weak man who broke under pressure? Was he trying to protect his knights, hoping that by sacrificing his own reputation and admitting to a corrupted ritual, he could save the order itself from the more damning charges of heresy? This theory suggests he was trying to offer the Pope and the King a scapegoat, a bad custom that could be reformed without having to condemn the entire institution. Another, more tragic interpretation is that he was simply out of his depth, a soldier trying to navigate a complex legal and political battle without the proper tools. He may have been given false promises by the king's agents, perhaps led to believe that a partial confession was the only way to save his own life and the lives of his men. The infamous Chinan parchment, a papal document rediscovered in the Vatican secret archives in 2001, shed some light on this. It records this very hearing and shows that the Pope's cardinals, after hearing the confessions of Malay and the others, actually granted them absolution. They believed the knights were repentant sinners, not unshakable heretics, and formally reconciled them with the Church. This document reveals a little-known fact in the eyes of the Pope's own investigators at this stage. The leadership of the Templars were not considered heretics to be burned, but flawed Christians to be forgiven. The Pope's plan, it seems, was not to destroy the order, but to reform it. He saw the confessions as evidence of corruption that needed to be cleansed, not a reason for annihilation. But this subtlety was completely lost on the public and, more importantly, on King Philip. All Philip cared about was the confession itself. He now had the ultimate weapon. He could ignore the Pope's absolution and focus on the damning admission of guilt from the Grand Master. The news of Molay's confession spreads among the imprisoned Templars like a disease. Your hope, which had been so carefully rebuilt, begins to crumble. If your own leader has admitted guilt, what chance do you have? The defense, which had been so spirited, begins to lose its momentum. Morale plummets. Some of the knights who had recanted their confessions now fall silent, terrified and confused. Who should they follow? The brave lawyers like Pierre de Boulogne, who urged them to keep fighting, or the Grand Master, who has seemingly surrendered? You are caught in a storm of conflicting information. You hear that the Pope was granted absolution, a rumor that gives you a flicker of hope. But then you hear that the king is parading the Grand Master's confession as definitive proof of the order's guilt. The power struggle between the Pope and the king is being played out with your lives as the stakes. Molay's failure of leadership at this crucial moment is a tragedy. He was a man raised in a world of black and white honor, of battlefield courage. He was unprepared for a world of gray areas of political maneuvering and legal traps. His attempt to find a compromise, to offer a partial confession in the hopes of a lesser sentence, backfired catastrophically. He thought he was navigating a legal process, but Philip was not interested in the law. He was interested in a conviction. Molay's confession, regardless of its nuances or the absolution that followed, gave the king exactly what he needed to push for the final, brutal phase of his plan. The Grand Master had tried to sacrifice himself to save the order, but in doing so, he may have just handed his enemy the sword with which to strike the killing blow. Despite the devastating news of the Grand Master's confession, a core of defiance remains. The defense does not completely collapse. In fact, for many of you, Molay's failure of nerve has the opposite effect. It stiffens your resolve. If the leadership will not fight for the order's honor, then you, the rank-and-file knights, must do it yourselves. The hope for a quick resolution is gone, replaced by a grim determination to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. The charge is led by the two brilliant Templar lawyers you have come to admire, Pierre de Boulogne and Renaud de Provence. They are not just knights. They are educated men, skilled in canon law, and they are utterly fearless. They rally the wavering knights, reminding them of their vows in the 2 centuries of the order's honorable service. They argue, persuasively, that the Grand Master is an old, broken man, and that his confession, extracted under duress, means nothing. The truth of the order lies with the hundreds of knights who know in their hearts that they are innocent. Under their leadership, the defense becomes more organized, more aggressive. A list is compiled of Templars willing to publicly defend the order. The number is staggering. Nearly 600 knights in the Paris region alone step forward and have their names put on the list. It is an act of immense collective courage. You add your name to it. You will speak for the order. You will recant your forced confession, publicly and officially, and you will expose the king's lies. You and your fellow defenders are brought from your various prisons to Paris and held together. For the first time in over 2 years, you are reunited with a large group of your brothers. The despair of isolation is replaced by the strength of solidarity. You share your stories of torture. You bolster each other's courage, and you prepare your testimonies. The atmosphere is electric with a renewed sense of purpose. You are brothers in arms once more, fighting one last great battle, not with swords on a dusty plain, but with words in a court of law. Your lawyers present a powerful case to the Papal Commission. They argue that the entire proceeding initiated by the king was illegal. They point out the contradictions in the forced confessions. They demand that the Pope hear the case himself in person. They highlight the fact that Templars outside of France are being found innocent. The defense is meticulous, logical, and compelling. The Papal Commissioners are clearly swayed. It seems impossible that they could condemn the order in the face of such overwhelming evidence of a frame-up. But you have forgotten about the king. Philip watches this resurgence of Templar defiance with growing fury. The papal inquiry, which he had expected to be a rubber stamp on his own investigation, is now threatening to exonerate the Templars. This would be a disaster for him. It would expose his motives, ruin his reputation, and, perhaps worst of all, he would have to give the money back. He cannot let that happen. The defense has become too effective. It must be silenced, and Philip has a way to do it. He finds a legal loophole, a jurisdictional technicality of breathtaking cynicism. He argues that while the order as a whole is being judged by the Papal Commission, the individual knights who have recanted their confessions are a separate matter. These men, he claims, had already confessed their heresy to his own inquisitors. By now recanting that confession, they are not simply innocent men telling the truth. They are, in the twisted logic of the Inquisition, relapsed heretics. And the punishment for a relapsed heretic is immediate. And it does not fall under the Pope's jurisdiction. It falls under the authority of the local bishop in this case, the Archbishop of Sens, a man who happens to be the brother of one of Philip's key ministers, a puppet of the king. This is a little-known but crucial turning point. The distinction between the trial of the order and the trial of the individual relapsed knights is the legal weapon Philip uses to bypass the Papal Commission and reassert his control. It's a move of sheer procedural violence. The academic community sees this as Philip's masterstroke, the moment he checkmated the Pope. Clement had tried to protect the Templars by taking over the case, but Philip simply changed the game, creating a new court, run by his own man, to deal with the most troublesome defendants. You know nothing of these high-level legal maneuvers. All you know is that you have put your name on a list of honor. You have stepped forward to defend the truth. You are crowded together in a Paris priory, waiting for your chance to speak before the Pope's men, feeling a sense of hope and purpose you haven't felt in years. You believe you are under the protection of the Church. You believe you are on the path to justice. You have no idea that your list of honor is about to be turned into a death list. The blow falls with the same shocking speed as the initial arrests. One morning in May 1310, soldiers surround the priory where you and the other defenders are being held. There is no explanation. You are simply rounded up, your names cross-referenced with the list you so bravely signed, the list of nearly 600 defenders. It is now being used by the king's men as a definitive roster of his most troublesome enemies. You are not taken before the Papal Commission. You are dragged before a different tribunal, a provincial council presided over by the king's man, Felipe de Marigny, the Archbishop of Sens. There is no pretense of an investigation here. There is no hearing of evidence. The process is swift and brutal. You are identified as a Templar who confessed to heresy and has now recanted that confession. The verdict is automatic. You are a relapsed heretic. The sentence is death. The next day, you learn the fate of the first group of your brothers. 54 Templars, all of the men who had stepped forward to defend the order, are taken from their cells. They are loaded on 2 carts and driven to a field just outside the city walls, near the Port Saint-Antoine. There, a terrifying scene awaits them. 54 wooden stakes have been driven into the ground. Piles of firewood are stacked at the base of each one. What follows is an act of judicial murder designed to terrorize the remaining defenders into silence. The 54 knights are tied to the stakes. They are offered one last chance to save themselves, reaffirm the confessions that were tortured out of them. If they admit their guilt, they will be spared the fire and sentenced to life in prison. It is a final, cruel test of their resolve. Not a single one of them breaks. They maintain their innocence to the very end, proclaiming the order's purity and calling on God as their witness. As the executioners light the pyres, the knights begin to chant the Salve Regina, their voices rising through the smoke and flames. The citizens of Paris watch in horror and, for many, a growing sense of pity and outrage. They are not witnessing the execution of monstrous heretics. They are witnessing a mass martyrdom. The smell of burning flesh drifts across the city. The news of the execution spreads like wildfire through the prisons where the rest of the defenders are being held. The effect is exactly what Philip and his archbishop intended. The defense shatters. It is one thing to have the courage to speak the truth to a papal commission. It is another thing entirely to hold to that truth when the price is being burned alive. The two brave lawyers, Pierre de Boulogne and Renaud de Provence, disappear from the record. Pierre de Boulogne is said to have been so horrified by the executions that he simply vanished, likely captured and thrown into a secret dungeon to rot his fate in hell. Renaud de Provence, seeing the hopelessness of the situation, is said to have reaffirmed his own confession to save his life, ending his days in prison. The leadership of the defense has been alienated. This specific event, the burning of the 54 knights, is a well-documented historical fact, but its strategic importance is sometimes underestimated. It was not just an act of cruelty. It was the king's endgame. He surgically removed the heart of the Templar defense. The papal commission was effectively rendered powerless. How could they continue to gather testimony from knights who were now terrified for their lives? Any knight who spoke in the order's defense would be immediately reclassified as a relapsed heretic and sent to the stake. The historical debate here centers on Pope Clement's reaction. Why didn't he intervene more forcefully? The records show that he was outraged. He wrote letters protesting the archbishop's actions and temporarily suspended the papal inquiry. But he did not excommunicate the king or the archbishop. Why the hesitation? The most likely answer is that he was politically checkmated. Philip had acted under the color of established inquisitorial law regarding relapsed heretics. While it was a cynical and brutal application of that law, it was technically legal within the French kingdom's ecclesiastical courts. Clement was faced with a choice: go to war with the French monarchy over a procedural issue, or accept the grim reality that he had been tabulated. He chose the latter. The message to you and the other surviving defenders is brutally clear. The king has demonstrated that he is willing to do anything to win. He will ignore the Pope, manipulate the law, and commit mass murder in broad daylight. The choice he offers you is simple: reaffirm your confession and accept a sentence of life in a dungeon, or cling to the truth and be burned at the stake. The hope you felt just a few weeks ago has turned to ash. The solidarity of your brotherhood has been broken by terror. The fight is over. All that is left is to make an impossible choice in the solitude of your cell, with the memory of your brother's chanting voices and the smell of smoke haunting the air. With the defense crushed and the remaining Templars terrified into silence, the final act of the tragedy could proceed. The fate of the order itself was now to be decided, not by a trial of evidence, but by political necessity. The Pope, Clement V, was trapped. King Philip's brutal execution of the 54 knights was a clear message. He would not be denied his prize. To continue to resist was to risk a full-blown schism, a war between the French crown and the papacy that Clement knew he could not win. He had to find a way to end the affair, to appease Philip while trying to preserve some shred of papal authority. The chosen venue for the final decision was the Council of Vigny. A major church council convened in the city of Vigny, which was located just outside of French territory, giving the illusion of neutrality. The council opened in October 1311. The issue of the Templars was the main item on the agenda. You, like the hundreds of other Templars languishing in prisons, hear only faint rumors of these proceedings. Your fate is being decided by powerful men in a distant city. You are no longer participants in your own story. You are merely the subject of its final chapter. At the council, something unexpected happens. Despite the terror campaign in France, many of the bishops and cardinals, particularly those from outside of Philip's direct influence from Spain, England, Germany, Italy, are not convinced of the order's guilt. They have seen the results of the inquiries in their own countries, where the Templars were found innocent. They demand that the order be given the right to a proper defense before the council. In a moment of extraordinary bravery, 7 Templars appear at the council, presenting themselves as representatives for the nearly 2,000 brothers who are still alive, and demand to be heard. This throws the council into turmoil. It's a direct challenge to the process Philip and Clement have carefully orchestrated. Philip is enraged. He doesn't want a debate. He wants a condemnation. He responds with his usual tactic, brute force. In early 1312, he marches a large army to the outskirts of Vigny, a clear threat to the assembled churchmen. He is there to ensure he gets the verdict he wants. Under this immense pressure, Clement knows he cannot push for a formal verdict of guilt based on a trial. The evidence is to contest it, and the council is to divide it. A guilty verdict would lack the legitimacy he needs. So he devises a legal workaround, a solution that is both clever and deeply unsatisfying. He announces that he will not be passing a judicial sentence on the order. He will not declare them guilty of heresy. Instead, he will use his supreme papal authority to suppress the order for the good of the Church. The formal decree, the papal bull known as Vox in Excelso, is issued in March 1312. The language of the document is a masterpiece of political hedging. It states that while he, the Pope, was not personally convinced of their guilt based on the inquiry, the order's reputation had been so damaged by the scandal, the accusations so vile, and the confessions, however obtained, so numerous, that it could no longer be allowed to exist. Its continued existence was a source of scandal and infamy to the faithful. Therefore, by an irrevocable and perpetual decree, the order of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon is hereby dissolved. It is not a conviction. It is an administrative dissolution. It's a legal distinction that matters greatly to historians but meant little to you. You are not officially branded heretics by the highest authority of the Church, but your order, your life, your entire world is gone all the same. This nuanced decision has been debated for centuries. Was Clement acting as a pragmatist, choosing the lesser of two evils to avoid a greater crisis? Or was it an act of profound cowardice, sacrificing the Templars to save himself? The document Vox in Excelso is a testament to his predicament. He cowed and condemned them on the evidence, but he cowed and saved them from the king. So he simply erased them. And what of the money? The whole affair at its core was about money. Clement, in a final attempt to salvage something from the wreckage, decrees in a subsequent bull ad providem that all of the Templars' immense properties and assets are to be transferred to their rivals, the Knights Hospitaller. This was meant to keep the wealth dedicated to the defense of Christendom, its original purpose. This leads to a little-known and ironic postscript to the story. King Philip, who had orchestrated this entire affair to get his hands on your wealth, was largely thwarted in his ultimate goal. He was forced by the Pope's decree to hand over the bulk of the Templar lands and castles to the hospitals. However, he was a master of loopholes. He billed the hospitals an enormous sum for the costs of his investigation and for protecting the Templar assets during the trial. He plundered the liquid cash from the vaults and held on to many properties for years, milking them for revenue before finally reluctantly turning them over. In the end, he got a substantial payout, but he did not get the whole prize. The primary beneficiary of your downfall was not the King of France, but your old rivals, the Hospitallers, who suddenly became the wealthiest landowners in Christendom. For you, the news of the Pope's decree is the final, dull blow. The order is gone. Your vows are meaningless. Your brotherhood is dissolved. You are now just a man in a prison cell with no institution, no cause, and no future. All that is left is for the Church to decide the individual fates of the thousands of now former Templars. For most, it will mean a life of penance in a monastery or a prison. But for your leader, the man who started all of this with a faltering confession, a different fate is waiting. For 2 more years, the world seems to forget you. The great affair is over. The order is dissolved. The lands are being handed over. History has moved on, but there is one last piece of unfinished business, the fate of the Order's highest-ranking leaders. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, and Geoffrey de Charny, the Preceptor of Normandy, have been sitting in a royal prison, their final sentence delayed time and time again. Then, on March 18th, 1314, it happens. A public stage is erected on the square in front of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. A crowd gathers. You are not there, but you hear the story later from a sympathetic guard, the whispers filtering through the stone walls of your prison. Molay and Charny, along with 2 other high-ranking Templars, are brought out onto the scaffold. They are to be read their final sentence by a panel of papal legates. The sentence is what everyone expects: life in prison. A quiet, ignominious end for the leaders of a disgraced order. But then, Jacques de Molay does something that no one expects. The old warrior, the man who had faltered, who had confessed, who had failed his order at its most critical moment, finds his voice. As the sentence of perpetual imprisonment is read out, he interrupts the cardinals. He steps forward, and his voice, which had been weak and uncertain for 7 long years, rings out across the square, clear and strong. He proclaims for all to hear that the charges against the order are false, that he is guilty not of heresy, but of the great sin of lying to save his own life. He declares that his confession was coerced, a betrayal of his brothers and his God. He says the order is pure and holy, and that he is ready to die for that truth. Beside him, Geoffrey de Charny joins in, shouting his own innocent son, retracting his own confession. The crowd is stunned into silence. The papal legates are thrown into confusion. They have lost control of the situation. But King Philip, who is likely watching from a nearby palace, is not confused. He is enraged. This is an act of public defiance, a final, desperate attempt by Molay to reclaim his honor and rewrite the ending of his own story. Philip does not wait for the church to decide what to do. He makes the decision himself. He declares Molay and Charny to be relapsed heretics, the same cynical legal maneuver he used to silence the defenders years earlier. The sentence is immediate: death by fire. That very same evening, as dusk falls over Paris, the 2 old knights are taken to a small island in the middle of the Seine, the Île des Sauvages. Stakes have been erected. As the executioners bind him to the stake, Molay reportedly makes one final, chilling request. He asks to be tied facing the towers of Notre Dame, and for his hands to be left free so that he can eye in prayer. As the flames lick at his feet, he does not scream or cry. He continues to proclaim the innocence of the order until the smoke and fire consume him. And it is here, in these last moments, that the most famous and enduring part of the Templar legend is born: the Grand Master's curse. According to a tradition that appeared in writing within a few years of the event, Molay, from amidst the flames, summoned his persecutors to meet him before the judgment seat of God. "Pope Clement," he cried, "Chevalier Guillaume de Nogaret, King Philip, I summon you to the tribunal of heaven within the year. Cursed, cursed, you shall all be cursed to the 13th generation." Is the story of the curse true? Did Molay actually say these words? It's impossible to know for sure. It doesn't appear in the immediate eyewitness accounts, but circulates very quickly afterwards. To historians, whether he literally spoke the words is less important than what happened next. The curse, real or imagined, appeared to come true with terrifying accuracy. Pope Clement V, who had been suffering from a debilitating illness, was dead within a month. He died in agony from some form of intestinal cancer. Guillaume de Nogaret, the king's ruthless minister, was also dead within the year, struck down by a sudden illness. And King Philip the Fair, the powerful monarch at the center of it all, died before the year was out. He suffered a stroke while hunting, fell from his horse, and died a few weeks later, at the age of just 46. The effect of these 3 sudden deaths was profound. To the people of the 14th century, it was not a coincidence. It was a sign of God's judgment. It was proof that the Templars had been innocent after all, and that their persecutors had been struck down by divine wrath. The curse cemented the image of Molay not as a failed leader, but as a martyr, and it retrospectively cast the entire affair in a new light. It was no longer just a political and financial dispute. It was a grand, cosmic drama of betrayal and retribution. The curse is perhaps the single most important element in the transformation of the Templar story from history into myth. It's a perfect, chilling ending that has captivated people for 700 years. Whether it was the hand of God or just a remarkable coincidence, historians will, of course, forever be in debate. The curse may have been fulfilled, and the chief architects of your destruction may be dead, but their demise does little to change your reality. You are still a prisoner in the Order's vast wealth. The true object of the whole affair is being carved up like a feast. In his final decree, Pope Clement had ordered that all Templar property be transferred to your old rivals, the Knights Hospitaller. It was a logical decision, meant to keep the assets consolidated in the hands of a military order dedicated to the defense of what was left of Christendom. But the gap between a papal decree and reality is a wide one, filled with the grasping hands of kings and nobles. The process of transferring the wealth is chaotic, piecemeal, and riddled with corruption. The hospitals, to their credit, try to claim what is rightfully theirs according to the Pope's will, but they quickly discover that every king in Europe has a bill to present. King Philip, before his timely death, had already bled the French assets dry, charging the hospitals exorbitant fees for his services in prosecuting you. He claimed the costs of the trial, the administration of the properties, the feeding of prisoners, an endless list of expenses that siphoned off a huge portion of the value before the lands were ever handed over. It's the same story in other kingdoms. In England, King Edward II, a much weaker king than Philip, is also reluctant to hand over the Templar estates. He holds on to them for years, milking them for revenue to fund his own mismanaged government. In Spain, the kings of Aragon and Castile argue that the Templar lands in their realms were granted specifically for the reconquest of the fight against the Moors and should therefore stay in Spain, not be given to an international order like the Hospitals. Eventually, new local orders are created to absorb the Templar properties there. The great transfer of wealth is less a transfer and more a feeding frenzy. The Hospitals do eventually receive the bulk of the properties, making them incredibly powerful overnight, but it is a diminished inheritance picked over by vultures. But what about the treasure? This is the question that will echo through the centuries. Not the land, not the castles, but the legendary Templar treasure. The hoards of gold and silver, the jewels, the holy relics that were supposedly stored in the vaults of the Paris and London temples. When Philip's men sealed the Paris temple on that fateful Friday morning, they expected to find a mountain of gold. They found the royal treasury, which was already the king's, and the order's extensive financial records. But the massive private, accumulated wealth of the order itself, it was conspicuously absent. This is one of the most enduring mysteries of the Templar saga. What happened to the treasure? The most popular legend, a tale that has fueled countless books and treasure hunts, is that the Templars, warned of the coming arrests, spirited it away in the dead of night. One story tells of a fleet of Templar ships, secretly loaded with the treasure, sailing from the port of La Rochelle, their destination unknown. Did they sail to Scotland, to Portugal, to North America? The theories are endless. A less dramatic, but perhaps more plausible explanation is that there was never a vast, centralized physical treasure to begin with. Your wealth was not primarily in chests of gold coins. It was in land. It was in castles, farms, vineyards, and mills all across Europe. It was a portfolio of assets, not a pirate's hoard. Your financial power came from your system of credit, the ledgers and ledgers that allowed you to move money invisibly. The treasure was, in a sense, an accounting system. And here lies a fascinating, little-known detail that supports this theory. When King Philip's men arrested the Templars in France, they also seized all of your accounting books. But the codes, the complex ciphers used to make sense of the ledgers, were a closely guarded secret. It's entirely possible that the king's men seized a library of financial documents that were, to them, completely unintelligible. The wealth was there on the page, but the key to unlocking it was gone, lost with the imprisonment and death of your high-ranking accountants. The historical debate on the lost treasure is, of course, immense. Most academic historians believe the story of a massive, hidden treasure is a myth, a romantic exaggeration of the order's liquid assets. They argue that the wealth was in the properties, and that wealth was, for the most part, accounted for and transferred to the hospitals and other claimants. But the myth is more powerful than the reality. The idea of a lost Templar treasure, still waiting to be found, is too compelling to disappear. It suggests that you, somehow, had the last laugh, that you managed to hide the heart of your fortune from the king's greedy grasp. Lying in your cell, you hear the rumors of a lost fleet, of a hidden vault. Perhaps it gives you a small, grim satisfaction. The king may have destroyed your order, stolen your lands, and taken your life. But maybe, just maybe, you managed to keep the real prize, the glittering symbol of your power, hidden from him forever, waiting in the darkness for a future that would never come. It's this very idea that will ensure your story never truly ends. Your own end comes quietly, years after the Grand Master's fiery demise. There is no trial, no public spectacle. You die in your cell, an old man in a forgotten corner of a royal prison. The cause is irrelevant: age, sickness, a broken spirit. You are one of the last of the historical Knights Templar, and your passing is the final, silent closing of a chapter of history. Your body is likely buried in an unmarked grave. As far as the world is concerned, the story is over. You are extinct, but you are wrong. Your story is not over. It is just beginning. Your death is not an ending. It is a metamorphosis. The historical Knights Templar are dead, but the mythical Knights Templar are about to be born, destined for an immortality far greater than any you could have imagined. The first seeds of the myth are sown in the immediate aftermath of your destruction. The story of Molay's curse and the swift deaths of the Pope and the King create a powerful narrative of martyrdom and divine justice. You are no longer seen simply as victims of a greedy king. You are cast as righteous innocents betrayed and murdered, whose cause was vindicated by God himself. This transforms you from a failed institution into a romantic, tragic symbol. Then comes the legend of your survival. The official story is that you were wiped out. But people begin to wonder, what about the knights outside of France who were found innocent? What about that fleet that supposedly sailed from La Rochelle, vanishing into the fog with the treasure? These loose threads are too tempting for storytellers to ignore. Whispers begin of Templars who escaped the purge, surviving in secret, hiding in the shadows, waiting. One popular legend has them fleeing to Scotland, a kingdom at the time excommunicated by the Pope and at war with England, making it a perfect haven. The story goes that a group of Templar knights joined Robert the Bruce's army and played a decisive role in the pivotal Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, their sudden disciplined charge shattering the English lines. There is absolutely no credible historical evidence for this, but it's a fantastic story. It provides a heroic continuation for you, a secret victory after your public defeat. For centuries you remain figures of folklore and romance. But the greatest transformation comes much later, in the 18th century, during the Age of Enlightenment. This is when the modern myth of the Templars as a secret society, the guardians of ancient wisdom, is truly forged. The intellectual climate is perfect. There's a fascination with chivalry, esotericism, and secret societies. And a new, influential movement is looking for an ancient and noble lineage, the Freemasons. In the 1732s, a Scottish orator named Chevalier Andrew Michael Ramsay gives a famous speech in which he links the origins of Freemasonry not to the builders of medieval cathedrals, but to the crusading knights. He paints a picture of a secret tradition of wisdom passed down from the Holy Land. He doesn't explicitly name the Templars, but the connection is made. Ambitious Masons, wanting to create higher, more exclusive degrees for their fraternity, seize upon you. They create new rites and rituals with a distinctly Templar flavor. You are the perfect ancestors, a secret brotherhood with initiation rites, a global network, a story of persecution, and a martyred grandmaster. This is where the great historical debate about your legacy now lies. Mainstream academic history is clear there is no formal, provable link between the historical 14th century Knights Templar and 18th century Freemasonry. The connection was an invention, a romantic adoption of your history to give a new society an ancient and glamorous pedigree. However, within some Masonic traditions and the wider world of esoteric thought, some argue for a genuine, hidden lineage that a small, secret core of Templar survivors passed their knowledge down through the centuries, eventually re-emerging within the structure of Freemasonry. This theory is what keeps the conspiracy flame alive. From this 18th century revival, your myth explodes. You are no longer just soldiers and bankers. You become the secret guardians of an incredible array of treasures and secrets. Not just your lost gold, but the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, the Shroud of Turin, the lost Gospels, the true bloodline of Christ. If something is powerful, ancient, and lost, someone will inevitably claim you were hiding it. As you take your last breath in the cold darkness of your cell, you would never know any of this. You die thinking you are a failure, the last remnant of a destroyed brotherhood. You can't imagine that your white mantle with its red cross will one day become a global symbol for secrets, conspiracies, and lost knowledge appearing in books, movies, and the wilder corners of the internet. You, the historical Templar, are dead. But your shadow, a far larger and more mysterious entity, will stretch on through the centuries, forever marching through the imagination of the world. History is over. The myth is just getting started.